Hey guys, tonight, we step quietly into the echoing halls of the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. A place wrapped in mist and memory, nestled among the pines, where the walls whisper and shadows dance softly under flickering lamps. It's a night filled with gentle chills and half-hidden secrets, the perfect blend of soothing calm and quiet unease. Picture yourself standing in a long, dimly lit corridor. Your breath clouds gently in front of you, the air holding a tender bite of cold, as if something unseen has brushed past. Beyond the carved wooden doors, somewhere deep within the hotel's hidden corners, a child's faint sobbing drifts softly through the dark, echoing gently in your ears, stirring your curiosity and slowly drawing you closer to its source. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. A gentle hush has settled over the Rocky Mountains, like the hotel itself is softly exhaling. Nestled quietly beneath the starlit sky, the Stanley Hotel stands elegant and serene, seemingly untouched by the relentless passage of time. Moonlight spills gently over its ornate facade, illuminating each carved balcony, each grand window with soft strokes of silver. It's beautiful, peaceful even yet. Beneath this tranquility lies something delicate, fragile, like the careful silence after someone has just stopped crying. Inside the hotel, along hallways carpeted in deep burgundy velvet lamplight, pools softly on floral wallpaper, aged by decades of whispers and quiet footsteps. Each door seems to conceal its own private history, quietly preserving forgotten stories, tender heartbreaks, and secret longings. Tonight, the hotel rests almost completely silent. Its usual visitors, long since retreated to dreams of happier days. Almost completely silent, because if you listen closely enough beneath the gentle creaks of settling timber and the soft hum of the ancient heating pipes, there's a tiny muffled sound. It is barely audible at first, a delicate, fragile cry. It ebbs and flows like the breathing of someone caught between sorrow and exhaustion. You strain to pinpoint the source, sensing instinctively that it is neither imagined nor easily explained. It drifts, elusive yet constant, as though the very walls themselves mourn something lost. Within the softly glowing confines of room 305, Michael Anderson shifts uneasily in his sleep. His dreams tonight are less restful, filled with fleeting images of dark corridors and dim, unfamiliar rooms. Michael is not usually troubled by such dreams. A writer by trade, he's used to vivid imaginings and late-night wanderings through worlds of his own creation. Yet tonight feels different. Tonight it feels as though something unseen watches him, waits patiently, whispering gently in a voice he cannot quite understand. Michael awakens, suddenly heart-beating softly but insistently, like the tapping of fingertips against glass. For a long moment, he lies perfectly still, senses attuned to the gentle symphony of night sounds around him, the muted ticking of an old-fashioned clock, the distant sleepy murmur of the wind outside his window. And then from somewhere deeper within the hotel, somewhere not far yet, somehow impossibly distant, comes that quiet, heart-rending cry. Michael sits up slowly, swinging his feet over the side of the bed, bare toes pressing into the plush carpet. The sensation grounds him slightly, a warm reminder of reality amid the strange intimacy of this unfamiliar sorrow. He rises, drawn quietly toward the door as if guided by something more powerful than simple curiosity. The hallway beyond is empty, lit only by the soft glow of ornate sconces spaced evenly along the walls. Michael pauses, listening again, breath held gently in anticipation. The crying seems softer now, almost hesitant, as though uncertain if it wishes to be heard. He follows it slowly, carefully stepping past rooms whose occupants sleep unaware of this delicate disturbance. The deeper into the hotel he walks, the older and stranger the surroundings become. Wallpaper, subtly yellowed with age, begins peeling at its corners, and framed portraits of long-forgotten guests watch him quietly as he passes. Ahead, the corridor bends slightly, narrowing to an alcove set off from the main hallway. Michael moves forward, stepping cautiously. His pulse quickens gently in his throat. Here, the air feels thicker, softer, somehow charged with a deep melancholy that nestles into his chest. At the end of the alcove is a small recessed door, half hidden in shadow. A door that seems out of place, as if built solely to be forgotten. Michael reaches out slowly, fingertips brushing lightly over cool brass. For a fleeting moment, a quiet shiver moves down his spine, soft as breath. He pushes the door gently, and it yields with a whisper, revealing a narrow staircase winding upward, shrouded in velvet darkness. The child's crying, stronger now, clearer, spills softly down toward him. The sound is heartbreaking in its quiet sincerity. Michael climbs the stairs carefully, feeling oddly compelled. It's almost like he's remembering something from long ago, just out of reach. The wood beneath his feet creaks softly each step, a gentle acknowledgement of his presence. The sound of weeping guides him upward, weaving a path through shadows and moonlight filtering gently through unseen windows. At the top of the stairs, another door waits slightly ajar, offering a thin sliver of silvery light to spill outward. Michael pauses, breath shallow, hand resting softly upon the knob. A faint warmth pulses through the metal, as though touched moments before by someone else. He pushes the door open quietly, stepping into a forgotten room bathed softly in moonlight. Dust motes dance, silently floating like ghostly fireflies. The room appears untouched, forgotten furniture draped in pale sheets that ripple gently, disturbed by the breeze from an unseen crack. In the far corner facing the wall, a child stands motionless. Small shoulders tremble slightly, delicate cries gently shaking the silence. The figure seems ethereal, pale as porcelain beneath the gentle light. Michael feels a soft ache in his chest, sadness mingling strangely with dread. "Hey," he whispers, voice gentle, not wishing to startle. The child turns slowly, movements delicate as paper caught on a breeze. Wide eyes glistening with unshed tears meet Michael's own. "Can you help me?" The child whispers, voice, tiny and fragile, echoing softly through the forgotten space. "I can't find my way home." As the child reaches out a small hand, a chill blossoms quietly through Michael's bones, weaving gently yet insistently through his veins. And in that fragile, suspended moment, he knows somehow, deeply instinctively, that the child's home is not a place he can guide him to so easily. Not anymore. For a moment, time feels suspended, caught delicately between heartbeats as Michael gazes into the child's sorrowful eyes. Their depths shimmer softly, pools of melancholy, reflecting quiet desperation, pulling gently at the edges of his soul. The silence is profound, wrapped like velvet around the dimly lit room. Moonlight continues to filter in softly, painting ghostly patterns across the old, dusty furnishings. Michael kneels slowly, bringing himself level with the child's haunting gaze. "Where's your family?" Michael whispers carefully, each word gentle as a lullaby, not daring to disturb the fragile bond holding them together. The child's lip trembles slightly. "I don't remember," he replies softly, eyes flickering uncertainly around the room. "I woke up alone, and now I can't find them." The simplicity and innocence of the words wrap tightly around Michael's heart. Every instinct compels him forward, his fingers moving involuntarily toward the child's outstretched hand. Yet before contact, a sudden chill caresses his palm, a cold whisper of caution. Michael pulls his hand back softly, confusion creasing his brow. "Please," the child whispers again, voice breaking slightly, eyes wide with fear and loss. Michael straightens slowly, breathing deeply to steady himself. "I'll help you find them," he promises softly, even though the words feel strangely hollow on his tongue. "But first, tell me, do you remember your name?" The child shakes his head slowly, pale blonde hair catching the silvery moonlight glowing softly like spun silk. "No one says my name anymore," he murmurs, eyes glancing away toward the floorboards. "They used to, but then they stopped. They forgot." The quiet despair in those words chills Michael deeply. The child turns away, slowly moving to a nearby window, gazing silently outward into the moonlit night. Michael follows hesitantly each step, creaking softly beneath him, feeling strangely intrusive in the child's solitude. Outside, the sprawling mountains are blanketed in darkness, and the forest surrounding the hotel rustles quietly in the cool night air. The child raises one small hand to the glass, pressing fingertips lightly against the surface. Michael notices then no reflection. The child's form leaves no mark on the pristine window, no shadow, nothing to suggest a presence beyond the faint whispering of sorrowful breath. A quiet realization settles upon Michael, gentle yet undeniable. He draws breath to speak, to ask questions he already suspects the answers to. But the child interrupts, whispering softly, without turning. "I've waited here so long, but no one can see me. Sometimes they hear me cry and they get scared, or they just pretend not to notice. But you came looking for me." Michael's chest tightens softly. He shifts his gaze downward, troubled yet tender. "How long have you been here?" "Longer than you can understand," the child murmurs, voice gentle yet somehow distant. "I see guests come and go. Seasons pass. Everything changes everything but me." Michael leans closer, drawn by empathy and sadness. "There must be something we can do. Someone who knows your story. Someone who remembers." The child finally turns back, eyes clouded with a deeper pain. "Only the hotel remembers. It keeps me here, and I don't know why. I'm tired, but I can't leave." Michael nods slowly, considering the words carefully. A lingering sadness permeates the air, softened by moonlight and shadows. The hotel feels different now, sentient, protective, yet somehow possessive. It's as if the walls are watching, listening, aware of the delicate connection forming between Michael and the lost child. A faint, barely audible creak sounds from the stairway behind them, gentle enough to blend with the whispers of the night breeze. Michael turns sharply, heart fluttering softly, instinct telling him they are no longer alone. Yet the doorway is empty, darkness stretching peacefully beyond. He turns back, but the child is gone. A soft gasp escapes Michael's lips, the absence sudden and jarring. Only moonlight remains, pooling gently across the empty floorboards. He moves quickly around the room, peering into shadows, calling softly yet urgently. "Hello, where are you?" The silence answers, peaceful yet unnerving, wrapping softly around his heart. Michael steps backward, slowly pausing by the window where the child had stood moments before. The glass feels cold beneath his fingertips, and he notices something strange, a subtle fogging, as if someone had pressed their breath softly against the pane. He leans in closer, pulse quickening gently. There in the delicate mist left behind is a tiny handprint, smaller and more fragile than he could have imagined. He stares for a long moment, entranced yet deeply unsettled. Slowly, the fog dissipates, leaving no trace behind. Michael takes a deep, steadying breath. He steps away from the window, glancing carefully around the empty room once more, then moves quietly back toward the stairway. The hotel seems still now, as if holding its breath, aware of something he is yet to fully understand. Descending the stairs slowly, he feels the weight of unseen eyes watching from hidden corners behind closed doors within the very walls themselves. The hallways feel longer, more winding now, as if shifting subtly to confuse him, to gently remind him that he is merely a guest, one who has stumbled softly upon secrets meant to remain hidden. Back in his room, Michael sits heavily upon the bed, staring blankly at the wall. Sleep feels impossible now, his mind racing gently with half-formed thoughts and questions without answers. The hotel breathes quietly around him, an ancient entity cloaked in elegant mystery. Hours pass softly, night stretching gently toward dawn, and slowly exhaustion claims him once more. As Michael drifts carefully into sleep, dreams return, fragments of faces, shadows, whispers a child's voice calling softly from darkness, asking again and again, "Can you help me find my way home?" The morning light seeped softly through the heavy curtains of room 305, painting long stripes across the faded carpet. Michael stirred slowly, reluctant to abandon the haze of sleep, his mind still clutching at fragments of uneasy dreams. The child's voice lingered faintly in memory, fragile as smoke. "Can you help me find my way home?" repeating, until it became part of the silence itself. He sat up, running a tired hand through his hair gaze, drifting toward the door, as though half expecting to see a small figure standing there watching with tearful eyes. But the hallway beyond was quiet, the world wrapped again in the stillness of early morning. Only the faint hum of the hotel's pipes filled the room, steady and unremarkable, as though the night had been nothing more than imagination. Yet on the windowsill lay something small, something he hadn't noticed before, a single toy marble. Its glassy surface caught the soft light, swirling with delicate streaks of pale blue and milky white. Michael reached for it cautiously, holding it gently between his fingers. The marble was cold, unnaturally, so as if it had been pulled straight from winter's grasp. He set it on the bedside table, unease prickling softly at the back of his mind. It hadn't been there when he arrived, of that he was certain. Breakfast in the hotel's grand dining hall did little to soothe his thoughts. Guests chatted quietly at tables adorned with lace and silver, their laughter and conversation warming the otherwise hushed atmosphere. Michael sat alone, sipping coffee, his notebook open, but untouched. The marble rested in his pocket, a weight both real and symbolic, as though tethering him to the strange events of the night before. When the waitress approached her, smile was polite, professional. "First time at the Stanley?" she asked, lightly pouring more coffee into his cup. "Yes," Michael said, voice lower than intended. He hesitated, then added, "It's a beautiful place." Her expression shifted just slightly, something unspoken flickering in her eyes. "It has its charm," she replied carefully, then moved along before he could say more. Michael watched her retreating figure, curiosity stirring. There had been hesitation in her tone, as if she too knew the whispers that clung to the walls of this place. After breakfast, he wandered the hotel's halls in daylight, hoping perhaps to find rationality in their brightness. The long corridors seemed less foreboding now, the ornate sconces' extinguished windows open to mountain light. Yet even bathed in sunshine, there remained a quiet heaviness, a feeling that the air carried something unseen. Near the main staircase, Michael paused to study a series of framed photographs lining the wall. Black and white portraits of guests from decades past, their eyes staring solemnly from another era. Families gathered stiffly before the camera, children dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their faces pale and expressionless. One photograph drew him in more than the others. It showed a small boy, perhaps 6 or 7, standing beside a woman whose arm rested protectively on his shoulder. The child's eyes were solemn lips, pressed in a faint, uncertain line. Something about those eyes felt achingly familiar, though he couldn't place why. Michael leaned closer, breath fogging the glass slightly. His reflection stared back, fragmented with the boy's image, until for a fleeting second, he thought he saw the child move, just a subtle tilt of the head, the faintest flicker in his gaze. Michael blinked, hard, stepped back, heart fluttering gently, but the photograph remained still. A voice broke his concentration. "You've noticed him, haven't you?" Michael turned to find an older woman standing nearby. She wore a modest cardigan, her gray hair pinned neatly back, eyes sharp yet kind. I'm sorry," Michael said, startled. "The boy," she said, simply nodding toward the photograph. "Guests often stop here. They say he looks familiar, like someone they've seen before." Michael hesitated. Who was he? The woman's gaze lingered on the photo. No one remembers his name anymore. The records from those years are incomplete. But people hear him still crying in the night, always near this wing, always searching. Her words struck Michael with quiet certainty, echoing the child's plaintive plea from last night. He nodded slowly, murmuring, "I thought I heard," but trailed off, uncertain how much to reveal. The woman looked at him knowingly, as though she'd already guessed. "If you heard him, then he's chosen you." "That doesn't happen often." Michael frowned gently. "Chosen me for what?" But the woman only offered a thin smile, eyes shadowed with unspoken knowledge. Something she whispered, "You'll discover in your own time." Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the depths of the hotel. Michael remained frozen, staring after her, a quiet weight settling into his chest. He returned his gaze to the photograph, the boy's solemn eyes meeting his once again, and he felt it deep inside, that faint pull, that strange tether binding him quietly to the child's sorrow. The day passed slowly, a blur of wandering halls and restless thoughts. By evening, clouds gathered over the mountains, shrouding the hotel in a soft, moody gray. Shadows returned to the corridors, longer now, stretching like fingers across the walls. Michael sat in his room as twilight deepened the marble on the table, gleaming faintly in the dim light. He felt certain it was a message, a token meant to guide him, though its meaning remained hidden. And as night finally fell, the silence thickened once more, settling around him like a familiar blanket. Then soft and fragile it came again, the child's cry. This time it was closer, much closer. The cry seeped into the room like a draft slipping through cracks in the window frame, thin, trembling, impossible to ignore. Michael froze, seated at the edge of his bed, his gaze fixed on the closed door. The sound rose and fell in delicate waves, not a scream or a wail, but the restrained sobs of a child, desperate and mournful. He stood slowly, each movement deliberate, as though afraid sudden noise might scatter the fragile voice into silence. The marble glistened faintly on the bedside table, catching what little light remained. Michael slipped it into his pocket without thinking, a talisman or perhaps an invitation, and moved toward the door. When he opened it, the hallway stretched empty, long and muted beneath the glow of dim sconces. The crying persisted low, but clear, pulling him gently onward. He stepped into the corridor barefoot against the carpet, following the sound as it drifted toward the far end of the hall. The hotel seemed altered in darkness. The ornate patterns of the wallpaper seemed to shift at the edges of his vision, curling like tendrils. Portraits along the walls seemed sharper, their painted eyes following quietly, expressions grave, almost disapproving. Michael tried to steady his breathing, each step slow, deliberate. The sound led him toward an older wing of the hotel, seldom used, its double doors propped slightly open. He slipped inside, the crying growing louder, now reverberating through the silence. The air felt cooler, damp somehow, as though this section hadn't seen warmth in years. The corridor here was narrower, lit only by occasional lamps, their glow trembling weakly, as if exhausted. Michael followed the sound to the very end, where a single door stood slightly ajar. He hesitated, heart fluttering softly. His hand hovered above the handle. The crying paused, replaced by silence so profound that he could hear the faint hum of his own pulse. Then came a whisper, fragile, childlike, right behind the door. "Please, don't leave me." Michael pushed the door open. The room beyond was small, square, stripped of any decoration. Dust coated the wooden floor, disturbed only by faint impressions, as if someone had walked circles there for years. A broken chair leaned against the wall, its legs uneven. And in the far corner, knees pulled to his chest, sat the boy. He was exactly as before, pale, trembling eyes glistening like mirrors in the half-light. His gaze lifted slowly to Michael, recognition sparking softly. "You came back," the boy whispered, voice cracked with relief. Michael stepped cautiously inside. "I told you I would help." His words felt strange, weighted with responsibility he hadn't agreed to yet couldn't escape. The child's lips quivered. "Everyone else leaves." Michael lowered himself to the floor, maintaining a careful distance. "I won't leave." For a long moment, the boy stared at him, unblinking. Then he slowly extended a hand again. This time, Michael didn't pull away. He let the small, cold fingers touch his own. A chill surged through him instantly, not sharp, but spreading, numbing, as though his blood itself had turned to ice water. His breath hitched softly, but he held steady. The boy's expression softened, almost grateful. "You can hear me because you listen," the boy murmured. "You see me because you believe." Michael swallowed hard. "Why are you here? What happened to you?" The boy's eyes flickered, shadows moving within them. He shook his head slowly. "I don't remember the end. Just the crying. Always the crying." Silence followed, heavy and expectant. Michael studied the child's face, searching for clues, but found only sorrow etched into features too delicate for such weight. Then faintly something shifted, the sound of a door creaking open elsewhere in the wing. Both turned sharply toward the hall, but it was empty shadows stretching unbroken. The boy pressed closer to the wall, trembling. "They don't like me talking to you," he whispered, voice tight with fear. Michael frowned. "Who doesn't?" The boy's answer was barely audible. "The ones who keep me here." Before Michael could respond, a sudden gust of air swept through the room, extinguishing the weak light from the hall. Darkness closed around them, thick and absolute. The boy's hand tightened in his freezing cold, and then from the hallway came another sound. Not a child's cry this time, but the deliberate, heavy tread of footsteps. Slow, steady, drawing closer. Michael's breath caught his pulse, hammering softly in his ears. The boy's eyes widened in terror. "Don't let them take me," he pleaded, voice breaking. "Don't let them take me again." The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Silence pressed in, crushing and suffocating. Michael's hand trembled, still entwined with the child's. Then the doorknob began to turn. The doorknob turned slowly, creaking with the strain of rusted metal. Michael felt his stomach tighten, his breath caught in the back of his throat. The boy's hand clutched at his desperately cold fingers, pressing hard enough to feel real, alive. The door eased inward, darkness spilling from the hallway into the already shadowed room. For a long moment, nothing entered. Only silence, the void where something should be. Michael's eyes strained against the dimness, trying to make sense of the shifting forms beyond the frame. Then, faintly, a shadow lengthened across the floor. It had weight presence, but no figure to cast it. The boy whimpered softly, shrinking closer to the wall. "They've come again." Michael swallowed hard, his instincts torn between running and staying rooted to protect the child. His voice cracked softly in the thick air. "Who are they?" The boy shook his head, his trembling figure bathed in faint moonlight spilling through the narrow window. "I don't know their names. They never talk to me. They just keep me." The shadow shifted, sliding forward like ink poured across wood. Michael's skin prickled every hair on his arms, rising as the temperature dropped sharply. He fought the urge to step back to surrender to fear, and instead squared his shoulders. The marble in his pocket burned cold, pressing against his leg. Almost instinctively, Michael pulled it out, holding it in his palm. The faint glow of the glass caught what little light existed in the room, reflecting pale streaks of blue and white. The shadow paused. Michael felt it then, an awareness, a focus directed squarely at him. It wasn't sight exactly, but something deeper, older, weighing down on him with immense gravity. The marble seemed to resist, trembling faintly in his hand, as though it was both shield and invitation. The boy's whisper broke the silence. "It belonged to me. They don't like when I touch it?" Michael glanced at him, startled. "Your marble." The child nodded, faintly, tears streaking down his cheeks. "It's mine. But they took it away. They said I didn't need it anymore." The shadow surged, suddenly stretching farther into the room. Michael tightened his grip on the marble, and the cold intensified until his hand felt frozen to the bone. Still, he didn't let go. "Stay behind me," he whispered to the boy. The child obeyed, huddling close, his presence small, but strangely steady. The shadow seemed to recoil slightly at the resistance its form pulling back toward the doorway, though never retreating completely. The pressure in the room eased just enough for Michael to breathe, and then, as abruptly as it had come, the shadow slipped back into the hallway, fading into nothingness. The door shuttered softly, swinging shut on its own with a hollow click. The silence that followed was profound, pressing against Michael's ears, until even his own breathing seemed too loud. He lowered his hand, staring at the marble, still glowing faintly. The boy looked at him with wide, grateful eyes. "You kept them away." Michael exhaled shakily, lowering himself against the wall. "What are they?" he asked again, voice rough with tension. The boy shook his head. "I don't know. They come at night. They make sure I can't leave." His voice softened, breaking slightly. "But tonight they were afraid of you." Michael turned the marble in his hand, watching the light twist within it. A thought began to form, quiet and uncertain, that perhaps this object was more than a toy. Perhaps it was a tether, a piece of the boy's forgotten life that still held weight against the darkness. The boy reached for it, hesitant, almost pleading. "May I?" Michael hesitated, then opened his palm. The child's small, pale fingers closed around the glass. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint warmth spread through the room, subtle but undeniable, lifting the heavy cold. The boy's eyes widened, his expression softening, as if he were remembering something precious. "I used to play with this outside," he whispered. "In the garden. My mother, she would call me inside when it was dark." Michael leaned closer. "What else do you remember?" But before the boy could answer, the hotel itself seemed to stir. The floorboards groaned softly beneath them. The wallpaper along the far wall rippled faintly, as if touched by unseen hands. A low, muffled hum filled the air, not mechanical, but alive, resonant, as though the building itself was breathing. The boy clutched the marble, tightly pressing it to his chest. His voice trembled. "They're angry now." Michael rose slowly to his feet, heart pounding softly but steadily. He reached out, resting a careful hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then we'll face them together." The hum deepened the walls, seeming to draw closer shadows, lengthening into shapes half-formed figures pressing from corners and cracks. And for the first time since his arrival, Michael realized the truth. The Stanley Hotel was not merely haunted. It was alive, and everything within its walls, every sound, every sorrow, was part of something vast, patient, and watchful, something that was not yet finished with him. The hum lingered low and steady, vibrating softly in the floorboards beneath Michael's feet. It was not the creak of old wood or the groan of pipes. It was deeper resonant, like a voice too ancient to form words. The walls themselves seemed to breathe in rhythm with the sound, a slow inhalation and exhalation alive, in a way that unsettled the marrow of his bones. The boy pressed tighter against him, clutching the marble as though it were the only thing anchoring him. His small frame trembled, though his wide eyes never left the darkened corners of the room. "It's awake," he whispered, voice barely audible. The hotel, Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to deny it, to cling to logic, but the vibration in the air was undeniable. The Stanley was not merely a vessel for spirits. It was their keeper. Its walls held them in place, feeding on their grief, their unfinished stories, perhaps even their despair. "What do they want from you?" Michael asked, kneeling so his gaze met the boy's. The child shook his head, pale hair falling across his face. "They don't want me to leave. I tried so many times. Every time I think I see a way out, they're there, waiting. They pull me back." Michael's hand curled into a fist against the floorboards. "But why you?" The boy's lip quivered. "Because I never stopped crying. I think they like it." The hum deepened again, as though confirming the words. The wallpaper trembled faintly, seams peeling back like slow wounds. Dust fell from the ceiling in lazy spirals. Michael's heartbeat thrummed in his ears, but he forced calm into his voice. "You're not alone anymore. I hear you. I'll find a way." The boy studied him, uncertain. "Others said that, but they couldn't keep me safe." Michael thought of the shadow, of how it recoiled when he held the marble. A connection flickered in his mind. This object, small and fragile, had power the boy no longer did. It was a remnant of innocence, of life, of memory. A piece the hotel had tried to bury. Before he could speak, the doorknob rattled sharply, breaking the moment. Not the slow, creeping turn of before, but violent, urgent, as though something was desperate to force its way in. The boy gasped, clutching the marble tighter, his knuckles bone white. Michael stood swiftly, positioning himself between the door and the child. His own fear tightened his chest, but determination steadied his limbs. The door shuddered on its hinges, the wood straining under the unseen assault. "Stay behind me," Michael murmured again. The boy nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. The pounding ceased, suddenly replaced by silence so complete it roared. Michael's breath came shallow, his ears straining for the slightest sound. Then slowly, the doorknob stilled, but when he looked down, he saw a long, thin crack forming across the wood, as if invisible nails were dragging themselves across its surface from the other side. The sound was soft, deliberate scraping deeper into the grain. The boy whimpered. "They're marking it. They'll come back." Michael forced himself to kneel again, grasping the boy gently by the shoulders. "Then we have to be ready. If they want to keep you here, it means they fear losing you. That means there is a way out." The child looked up at him, hope flickering faintly through his fear. "How?" Michael didn't answer right away. He reached into his pocket, drawing out his notebook. The pages fluttered as though stirred by the hum trembling faintly in his hands. He had come here to write, to escape his own creative block, but perhaps this was why he had been drawn to the Stanley in the first place. "Your story," he said softly, looking at the boy. "If no one remembers your name, then I will. If no one speaks your story, then I will write it. You don't have to be forgotten. The boy blinked, uncertain. Would that help me leave? Michael hesitated, but the hum shifted around them, pulsing faster, almost agitated. It was as though the hotel itself bristled at the idea. He clenched his jaw. Yes, stories are powerful. If we tell yours, maybe it will set you free. The boy held the marble tighter to his chest, gaze flicking toward the door. Then we have to hurry. They won't let you. Michael placed the notebook on the floor pencil, poised, heart pounding. Tell me everything you remember. Start with your name. The boy's lips parted, trembling, his voice fragile yet determined. My name is Daniel. And as the words slipped into the air, the hum rose sharply, vibrating the walls until dust cascaded from the ceiling. The crack in the door spread wider, splitting deeper. The hotel did not want Daniel remembered. Michael gripped the pencil tightly. Then Daniel, let's begin. The moment Daniel's name was spoken aloud, the air thickened, pressing heavy on Michael's chest, as though the entire room had inhaled at once and refused to exhale. The hum vibrated sharply, no longer steady but fractured, strained, as if the hotel itself recoiled from the sound. Michael steadied his hand pencil, hovering over the first blank page of his notebook. Tell me, Daniel, he urged softly. Whatever you remember, no matter how small. The boy hesitated, still clutching the marble to his chest. His pale lips quivered before words began to slip out, fragile as whispers of smoke. I remember the garden, he said. Roses taller than me. My mother's hands smelled of lavender. She'd call me in when the sun went down. Michael scribbled quickly, capturing every detail. The words felt heavy, important, as though inscribing them gave them a weight the air itself recognized. Daniel's voice grew steadier. There was a window in my room. I liked to watch the stars. Sometimes I thought they watched me back. The hum deepened with disapproval. The walls groaned, wallpaper tearing faintly at the seams. The crack in the door widened further, wood splintering softly. Daniel flinched, but Michael raised a hand. Keep going. Don't stop. The more you remember, the less power they have. The boy's eyes flickered with fear, but he continued. I was 6. I had a birthday cake with white icing. I think it was the last one. His voice broke a sob, slipping free. After that, I got sick. I remember lying in bed, the sound of rain on the roof. My mother crying when she thought I was asleep. Michael's pencil moved furiously, hand cramping, but he didn't dare slow. His own breath came fast, shallow, yet the act of writing seemed to form a barrier. The hum wavered, fluctuating, as though the hotel strained against the growing strength of Daniel's remembered life. Suddenly, the marble in Daniel's hand pulsed faintly with light, a soft glow that spilled across his small fingers. He gasped, looking down at it with wide eyes. It feels warm, he whispered. Like before. Michael nodded, voice firm. That's your life, your truth. They can't take that away from you anymore. The boy clutched it tighter, drawing strength from its glow. Then came the first knock. A deep, resonant pounding shook the door, rattling the hinges, sending shards of wood scattering across the floor. Michael jerked his head up, heart hammering. The boy whimpered, shrinking back against the wall. They know what you're doing, Daniel, whispered, his voice quaking. They'll break through. Michael tightened his grip on the notebook. Then we'll finish before they can. The pounding grew louder, faster in rhythm with the hotel's pulsing hum. The air seemed to vibrate, shadows swelling in the corners like living things. Tell me something else, Michael urged, raising his voice to be heard over the noise. Anything you can remember, Daniel. The boy's tears streaked down his pale cheeks, but he forced himself to speak. I had a dog. His name was Clover. He followed me everywhere. He used to sleep at the foot of my bed. Michael wrote each stroke of the pencil, fierce, deliberate. The glow from the marble flared brighter, spilling light across the room. The pounding on the door faltered, a hesitant pause, as though whatever pressed from the other side felt its grip loosening. Good, Michael breathed. Keep going. Daniel clutched the marble to his chest, words tumbling faster now, breaking free from long buried silence. My father read me stories. My favorite was about a knight who fought shadows. He said I was brave like that knight. I wanted to be. Michael's chest tightened, a lump forming in his throat, but he didn't stop. The boy's memories spilled onto the page line after line, building a story that was no longer lost. The marble pulsed with every word steady as a heartbeat. The hotel roared. The walls shuddered violently, dust raining down lamps, flickering wildly. The door cracked further, splintering under the strain, as the unseen force pressed harder to break through. Daniel's voice rose above the chaos, trembling but defiant. I don't want to cry anymore. I want to go home. The glow from the marble surged, spilling into the room in a flood of pale light. Michael shielded his eyes, his hand never leaving the page as he scrawled the last words Daniel spoke. The pounding on the door ceased. The hum fractured into silence. For a moment, there was nothing but the child's soft, steady breathing and the faint scratch of pencil on paper. Michael lowered his notebook, heart pounding. He looked at Daniel, whose face was bathed in the glow of the marble. The boy's eyes were no longer empty pools of sorrow. They shimmered with something brighter, hope. But the silence that followed felt heavy, uneasy. The hotel was not defeated. It was waiting. And Michael realized with quiet certainty that finishing Daniel's story was only the beginning. The silence after the marble's glow faded was unlike any silence Michael had ever known. It wasn't peace. It wasn't relief. It was something held in suspension, like the pause before a storm tears across the mountains. The walls around him seemed to lean inward, listening, calculating. Daniel sat hunched against the wall, cradling the marble as though it were a heartbeat he couldn't afford to lose. His eyes shimmered with fragile hope, yet shadows clung stubbornly to the hollows of his face. Michael's notebook rested open across his lap, the pencil lying slack in his hand. His writing filled pages with hurried scrawl, Daniel's life stitched into sentences that trembled under the weight of truth. For the first time since stepping into the Stanley Hotel, Michael felt he had pulled back a corner of its veil. He had seen the boy for who he truly was, not just a lost echo, not just sorrow made sound, but a child who once lived, loved, played. But the hotel knew. He could feel it. A low creak unfurled through the floorboards, rolling beneath them like distant thunder. Michael tensed his eyes, darting toward the door, still marred with long, thin cracks. Daniel whispered, "They're not gone. They never go." Michael placed the notebook down, his voice calm, despite the unease thrumming in his chest. "Then we'll write faster. We'll finish your story before they stop us." The boy shook his head. "It won't be enough. They'll try to take you too." The words sank deep, chilling. Michael thought of the shadow that recoiled from the marble, the unseen figures pressing through walls, the hum that was not a hum, but a hunger. The hotel did not simply keep Daniel, it fed on him. His crying, his fear, his unfinished story were sustenance. And now, by writing it down, Michael had made himself visible to the same hunger. Before he could answer, a sound drifted from the hallway. Not pounding, not scratching. Something worse. A laugh, soft, low, deliberate. It rose gently like an adult, chuckling at a secret only they understood. It carried no joy, only cold mockery. Michael felt his breath falter, his body stiffen. Daniel whimpered, clutching tighter at the marble. "They're closer," the boy whispered. "They're coming inside." The laugh echoed again, nearer now, sliding along the corridor walls. It was joined by another sound, a faint dragging, like something heavy being pulled across carpet. Step by step, scrape by scrape, it drew nearer. Michael rose to his feet, moving instinctively to shield Daniel. He gripped the notebook like a weapon, absurd as it felt. His voice, low but steady, cut through the hush. Stay with me, Daniel. Don't listen to them." The boy nodded quickly, his tears glinting in the dim glow of the marble. The laugh stopped, replaced once more by silence. Then came the faintest tap at the door, soft, almost polite. A pause, then another. Tap, tap, tap. Michael's grip tightened. The door shivered under the pressure of something waiting patiently beyond it. A voice seeped through the crack, distorted by the wood, but unmistakably human in its cadence. "You can't keep him." The words were drawn out oily, each syllable dripping with contempt. Michael's heart thudded, but he forced his voice steady. "He doesn't belong to you." The voice chuckled low, the sound slithering across the floor. "He belongs to us all. The hotel keeps what it takes." Daniel whimpered softly, hiding his face against Michael's side. The marble in his hand pulsed weakly, as though straining against the voice. Michael looked down at the boy, then at his notebook, filled with Daniel's memories. He understood now the act of remembering was rebellion. The telling of the story, a defiance that threatened the hotel's hold. Raising his chin, he spoke louder, clearer, not just to Daniel, but to the very walls. "His name is Daniel. He had a mother who loved him, a dog named Clover, a father who told him stories. He laughed. He played. He dreamed. You can't take that from him." The effect was immediate. The hotel roared. The wallpaper split with a shriek, dust pouring from the ceiling. The tap at the door became a violent pounding, each strike rattling the hinges. The voice snarled, all mockery gone, replaced by fury. "Silence him," it screamed. "Silence you." Michael dropped to his knees, clutching the notebook close. He whispered to Daniel, "Hold onto it. Don't let go." The boy pressed the marble tighter against his chest. Its glow surged, spilling light into every corner of the room, forcing shadows back with a hiss like steam meeting flame. The pounding stopped. The voice was gone. Only the hum remained, low, resentful, but weakened. Daniel's breathing slowed, his trembling easing as the light steadied. He looked up at Michael with wide, searching eyes. "Do you think if I finish telling you everything, they won't be able to touch me anymore?" Michael brushed dust from his notebook, his chest still tight with fear, but steadier than before. "Yes," he said softly, "and I'll be here to listen until the very end." The boy nodded, clutching the marble close. "Then we have to hurry." Because the hotel wasn't finished. It would never be finished. And somewhere in the heavy silence that followed, Michael realized something terrifying. He wasn't sure he would be allowed to leave either. The night stretched long, unbroken by the comforts of sleep. Michael sat cross-legged on the floor, his back against the cold plaster wall, the notebook balanced across his knees. Daniel remained close, clutching the marble, its faint glow painting soft curves of light across his small face. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows with a steady whine, as though the mountain itself were warning them away. Inside, the hum of the hotel persisted, slower now, but heavy with resentment. The building seemed to brood in silence, wounded by the memories spoken aloud, yet unwilling to relinquish its claim. "Tell me more," Michael urged, gently pencil poised. Daniel's voice was timid at first, uncertain, but as the words left him, the glow brightened, the heaviness in the room easing. "I remember my room. The wallpaper was blue. My bed had a quilt with stars stitched across it. Clover used to curl up there when I was sick. My mother said he kept me safe." Michael wrote quickly, his hand aching but unwilling to pause. The boy's details breathed life into the pages, carving out a history the hotel had tried to erase. The boy continued. "My mother sang to me at night, a lullaby. I can't remember the words, but I remember her voice. Soft, like the wind in the trees." Michael's throat tightened as he jotted the words down. He glanced at the door, its cracked wood silent. For now the fury that had shaken it earlier replaced with watchful stillness. He knew the reprieve wouldn't last. "Daniel," he said carefully, "do you remember what happened?" The night you started crying. The boy's eyes clouded, his small shoulders curling inward. I was sick for a long time, but that night, I remember a storm. The power went out. My mother was lighting candles. His fingers trembled on the marble. Then, I heard voices in the hall. Not my father's, not hers. They sounded angry. She told me to stay in bed to be quiet. Michael's pencil stilled. He leaned closer. And then, the boy shivered. I don't know. I was cold. I kept crying. I wanted her to come back, but she never did. His voice broke. When I woke up, everything was empty. Just me. And then, the hotel wouldn't let me go. The words hung in the air, heavy as lead. Michael stared at the boy, his mind circling possibilities. Illness. Abandonment. Something darker hidden by time and silence. The marble flickered faintly, its glow dimming as Daniel's voice trailed away. The boy clutched it tighter, desperate. I'm afraid if I remember more, they'll come back. Michael placed a hand gently on his shoulder. They'll come whether you remember or not. But if you face it, if you tell your story, they can't own it anymore. It will be yours again. Daniel met his gaze, eyes wide, uncertain. And then, without warning, the lamps in the hallway flared bright through the crack in the door. Shadows stretched beneath it, dozens of them long and writhing like fingers sliding under the threshold. The hum deepened louder, vibrating the floor. The walls rippled their seams, splitting open like old wounds, revealing dark gaps that pulsed faintly. Michael scrambled to his feet, notebook in hand. Stay behind me, he hissed. The boy pressed against the wall, the marble glowing once more as the shadows slid across the floorboards, creeping toward them. A voice rose from the gaps, not one, but many, layered together like a chorus of whispers. He belongs to us. Michael's pulse raced, but he raised his notebook like a shield, words trembling on his lips. No, he belongs to his story. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing the glow of the marble, forcing them back. But their numbers swelled, pressing harder, spilling like ink through the cracks. Daniel cried out, his voice sharp with terror. They're trying to take me. Michael lunged forward, placing the notebook in Daniel's lap. Then hold on to your story. Read it. The boy stared at him, trembling. I can't. Yes, you can, Michael urged. Read the words. Say them out loud. Remind them who you are. Daniel clutched the notebook with shaking hands, his eyes darting across the messy pages. He began to speak, voice faltering at first. My name is Daniel. I lived here in this hotel. I had a mother who sang to me, a father who told me stories, a dog named Clover. The shadows shrieked, recoiling sharply as the marble's light flared brighter. Daniel's voice grew stronger. I played in the garden. I watched the stars. I had a birthday cake with white icing. I was loved. The wall shuddered, the hum breaking into fractured dissonance, the chorus of voices screaming in fury. The door rattled violently, splinters snapping loose. Michael held his ground, shouting above the chaos. Keep going, Daniel. Don't stop. The boy's voice rose fierce and clear. I don't belong to you. I belong to them, to my family, to my story. You can't keep me here anymore. The marble erupted with blinding light, flooding the room with brilliance. Shadows dissolved, shrieking, fading into nothingness. The hum collapsed into silence, and for the first time the Stanley Hotel felt still. Daniel lowered the notebook slowly, his chest rising and falling with shaky breaths. Tears glistened on his cheeks, but his eyes were brighter, stronger. Michael exhaled, his own body trembling with relief. He reached out, squeezing the boy's shoulder. You did it. But as the light dimmed and the silence stretched, Michael noticed something unsettling. The boy was still there, and so was the hotel. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The silence was no longer filled with crying, nor with the hotel's low, oppressive hum. It was pure, startlingly empty, as though the building itself had retreated to lick its wounds. Michael leaned against the wall, every muscle trembling from the surge of adrenaline. His pencil had snapped in his grip, half of it lying splintered on the floor. Daniel sat cross-legged with the notebook still open on his lap, his pale fingers stroking the marble as though it were a living thing. The faint glow had dulled, but not disappeared. It pulsed gently steady as a resting heartbeat. "I thought it was over," Daniel whispered at last. His voice was stronger than before, no longer fragile whimpers, but a quiet statement. Michael met his gaze. "Maybe it is." But he didn't believe it. Not yet. The Stanley was too vast, too old, too full of voices swallowed and forgotten. One boy's freedom couldn't unravel the roots of an entire living thing. Still, something had shifted. The fact that Daniel sat here with him now, no longer weeping, no longer shrinking from the dark, that meant something. "You felt it, didn't you?" Daniel asked softly. "When I spoke my name, when I said who I was." Michael nodded. "It hurt them. They don't want you remembered." Daniel's lips pressed thin, thoughtful, in a way no child should have to be. "Then maybe there are others, like me. Others who forgot." The suggestion cut into Michael like a blade of ice. His gaze drifted instinctively to the cracked door, the splintered wood still etched with invisible nails. "You think you're not the only one." Daniel hugged the marble tighter. "I hear them sometimes, not just the ones who come for me. Other voices, crying, whispering. They don't know who they are either." Michael's chest tightened. 100 stories buried 100 cries, muffled by walls that fed on silence and sorrow. The Stanley had not simply trapped one child, it had collected many. A deep unease settled into him. His task had seemed clear: tell Daniel's story, free him. But now the horizon widened, darkened. If there were others, if the hotel held them too, then this was only the beginning. Daniel tilted his head. "They'll try to stop you if you listen to them. They'll try harder next time." Michael forced a weary smile. "Then we'll just have to try harder too." The boy didn't return the smile. His eyes flicked toward the ceiling where faint creaks had begun again, subtle, almost hesitant, as if the hotel was regaining its strength. Michael stood stretching stiff legs. The dim light of dawn crept thinly through the window, brushing pale silver across the dust-coated floor. Morning felt hollow fragile, the quiet before another storm. He looked at Daniel. "Do you feel different now?" The boy glanced down at the marble in his hand, then back at Michael. "I feel lighter, like I can breathe. But I'm still here. I don't know if I'm free." Michael considered this, the weight of exhaustion pressing heavy on his shoulders. Maybe it takes more than one night. Daniel rose carefully, the marble never leaving his grasp. His gaze moved to the door. "They'll come again. And next time, it won't just be me they're after." Michael swallowed hard. He knew the boy was right. The hotel had marked him now. Whatever had kept Daniel bound would not release its new adversary so easily. A sudden knock startled them both, 3 sharp raps against the door, ordinary in sound, yet jarring in context. Michael froze, blood running cold. A pause. Then a woman's voice drifted through, muffled but calm. "Mr. Anderson, housekeeping." Michael blinked. Daylight. Normalcy. The world beyond this room still turned. Slowly he cracked the door. A young woman stood there holding a bundle of linens. Her smile was polite, her eyes curious as they flicked past him into the dimness of the room. "Would you like fresh towels?" Michael hesitated. He glanced over his shoulder. The room appeared empty now. No small figure against the wall. No glow of marble. Only dust sunlight and his notebook lying open on the floor. His breath caught. "Daniel," he whispered. No reply. The housekeeper tilted her head. "Sir?" Michael forced a smile, voice rough. "No, thank you." He closed the door gently, leaning against it once it clicked shut. His pulse hammered. Had Daniel been pulled back into the hotel's hidden folds, or had the boy finally slipped free? His story spoken, his sorrow named. On the floor, his notebook lay open. The last words written in his own hand were not his. They were neat, small, childlike. "I am Daniel. I am not forgotten." Michael's throat tightened, a strange blend of relief and dread filling him, because even as he stared at the words, the marble rolled softly across the floor from nowhere, stopping at his feet, and the hum returned, faint, patient, promising. The Stanley had only begun to play. Michael stared at the marble at his feet, its pale veins catching the thin wash of morning light. The glow was gone now. Only glass and silence remained, but the air still held that faint hum deep in the timbers of the room, like the aftertaste of a storm. He crouched slowly, picking up the marble, rolling its cold weight in his palm. "Daniel," he whispered, though he knew there would be no reply. His words sank into the hush like stones into a lake, vanishing without ripples. The notebook still lay open nearby. Michael turned it gently, scanning the words again, his frantic scrawl interrupted by those smaller, careful letters. "I am Daniel. I am not forgotten." He traced them with his finger, chilled by the thought. If Daniel had left the message, then he had crossed the boundary between memory and presence. A ghost shouldn't have been able to press pencil to paper. And yet, the letters stood. Proof. Michael leaned back against the bed frame, rubbing tired eyes. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, thinning the shadows across the floor. The hotel stirred faintly, footsteps, the faint murmur of other guests moving about, a door closing somewhere down the hall. Normalcy. And yet the hum persisted low beneath it all, unnoticed by anyone but him. He should have left the Stanley behind. That was the sensible thing, the sane thing. But the marble burned cold against his skin, and the notebook whispered its demand in silence. Finish the story. By mid-morning, he was wandering the halls again, drawn toward the older wing where the boy had first appeared. The hotel in daylight seemed less sinister, its walls bright beneath windows spilling mountain-light portraits softened in warmth. Yet beneath the glow, the sense of being watched never eased. Michael paused at the photograph wall once more, his gaze drawn to the same image, the solemn boy beside his mother. Only now, in the light of morning, something struck him with quiet horror. The boy's hand in the photograph no longer held still. His fingers clutched something small, round, faintly familiar. A marble. Michael blinked hard, stepping closer. No, surely it had always been there, overlooked in the dimness of before. Yet he couldn't shake the sense that the detail had emerged only now after the night's defiance. "You've seen him too, haven't you?" The voice startled him. Michael turned to see the older woman from before, the one with the cardigan and sharp, kind eyes, standing at the end of the corridor. She watched him steadily, her expression unreadable. Michael swallowed. "Daniel, that's his name." Her lips thinned. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You should be careful speaking it aloud." Michael frowned. "Why?" "Because this place doesn't let go easily." She glanced toward the photograph wall. "Every guest who remembers too much leaves a piece of themselves here, and some never leave at all." Michael's chest tightened. "You've seen him." A shadow passed through her gaze, soft but heavy. "I've heard him many times, but I never knew his name until now." She fixed him with a piercing look. "And if you know it, then you're part of it too." Michael felt the marble in his pocket, pulse faintly cold, threading deeper into his skin. He forced his voice steady. "What do you mean, part of it?" The woman's expression softened with something like pity. "This hotel thrives on unfinished stories. That's why people come back again and again, drawn to something they don't understand. You've given one of those stories a name, Mr. Anderson. Do you really think the Stanley will let you walk away now, The hum deepened beneath her words, a quiet acknowledgement, as though the hotel itself agreed. Michael exhaled heavy, his thoughts spinning. He had freed Daniel, or so he believed, but in doing so he had opened himself to the same net that had trapped the boy. The woman's voice softened, carrying the weight of truth whispered too late. "You'll hear them again tonight. The others, their cries." Michael's breath hitched. "Others," she nodded slowly. Daniel was only one. Her eyes darkened with something unspoken. "And the Stanley has many rooms." The words sank deep into Michael's chest, heavier than the marble pressing against his side. He turned back to the photograph, to the child's solemn eyes staring across time marble in hand. The hotel seemed to lean in around him, walls closing softly, patiently. Daniel had been the beginning, and Michael knew with quiet dread that the Stanley was far from finished. Michael spent the rest of the morning pacing the hotel's grand halls, his notebook clutched tight against his chest like a lifeline. The ornate chandeliers above swayed faintly in unseen drafts, scattering fractured patterns of light across the floor. Guests strolled casually, their laughter echoing in the lobby, oblivious to the low hum beneath it all. To them, the Stanley was a relic, a novelty, polished wood mountain views and whispers of old legends. But to Michael, every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of a lamp felt like breath against his skin. The woman's words gnawed at him. Daniel was only one, and the Stanley has many rooms. He wandered toward the library, seeking solitude, perhaps answers. The room was empty, its air thick with the scent of old leather and paper. Dust motes floated lazily through beams of light. Shelves lined the walls filled with books untouched by most modern hands. Michael ran his fingers along the spines until one thin, leather-bound volume seemed to resist him, its cover rough with age. He pulled it free, the binding groaning faintly. Inside, he found faded records, guest names, dates, notes scribbled in careful cursive. Early 1900s. He traced the names, heart thudding gently. Families, couples, children, most with departure dates neatly noted. But here and there, gaps. Blank spaces where an arrival had been recorded yet no departure followed. One name stopped him cold. Daniel Whitmore, age 6. Arrival noted in 1911. Departure blank. Michael's throat tightened. His fingers trembled over the ink, the letters fragile, fading, yet undeniable. The boy had been real. A guest, not a ghost story conjured by the hotel. He turned the pages faster, finding more gaps. A girl named Clara, age 9. A young man named Thomas, 17. An entire family, the Harpers, whose names ended without closure. The notebook in his hand suddenly felt heavier. Daniel had been right. He wasn't alone. A faint, shuffling sound broke his concentration. Michael froze, listening. The library door, which had been firmly closed, now stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, the hall stretched quiet and empty. He stepped forward, heart quickening, only to find a trail of faint footprints leading across the dusty floor. Small, bare, childlike, they led toward the far corner of the library, vanishing behind a tall shelf. Michael hesitated, breath shallow. "Daniel," he whispered. No answer, only silence, patient and heavy. He stepped around the shelf and stopped. A little girl stood there. Her dress was white, yellowed with age, frayed at the hem. Her dark hair hung in loose curls, and her eyes were wide, solemn, reflecting the faint light. She looked at him without fear, her hands clasped in front of her. Michael's chest tightened. "Who are you?" The girl tilted her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara." The name echoed through him. He had just seen it in the book. Age 9. No departure. His grip on the notebook tightened. "Clara, you stayed here, didn't you?" Her expression flickered, a shadow of sorrow crossing her face. I was waiting. I'm still waiting. Michael's breath trembled. For who? She didn't answer. Instead, her gaze shifted toward the shelves, toward the old ledger he had left open. You found us. A chill spread through him, as if the air itself turned to frost. There are more of you. Clara's eyes darkened. So many. Too many. The hotel keeps us. We forget who we are, until someone remembers. Michael thought of Daniel's desperate crying, his plea to be led home. The hum in the walls seemed louder now, as though the building itself pressed close to hear every word. Clara stepped nearer, her presence both delicate and heavy with sorrow. You remembered Daniel. Now you must remember the rest. The notebook felt impossibly heavy in his hands, its blank pages yawning wide, hungry for stories. His heart pounded as he stared at the girl, realization pressing down like a weight. The Stanley was not merely haunted. It was a keeper, a collector of unfinished lives, and somehow he had become its chronicler. Clara reached out, her small hand hovering just short of his. If you write us down, maybe we can go. Maybe we can be free. Her voice quivered on the last word, fragile and uncertain. Michael swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to run to escape the weight of what the hotel demanded. But another instinct, quieter and stronger, kept him rooted. He couldn't turn away now. Not after Daniel. Not after seeing the names in the ledger. He nodded slowly, opening his notebook to a fresh page. Then tell me, Clara. Tell me your story. For a heartbeat, the silence deepened, the hum of the hotel swelling like a warning. And then the little girl began to speak. Clara's voice at first was no more than a trembling thread, as though the act of speaking tugged at something buried deep within the bones of the Stanley. She twisted her hands together, glancing over her shoulder, as though expecting shadows to reach for her at any moment. I was 9, she whispered. My father brought me here after my mother died. He said it would be good for me. Fresh mountain air, quiet nights. He thought it would make me smile again. Her lips quivered, but no smile came. I tried. I really did. Michael's pencil moved steadily, capturing each word. The faint scratching seemed to irritate the silence. The very air pulsed in protest, but he did not stop. Clara lowered her gaze. At first, it was nice. I met other children. We played hide-and-seek in the halls when no one was watching. But then, they started disappearing, one by one. Their parents would say they went home, but I knew better. I heard them crying through the walls. I still hear them. Michael froze mid-stroke, glancing up. Clara's eyes had darkened pupils wide in the dim light. They cry like Daniel. She continued softly. Only no one comes for them. The notebook trembled in his hands as he forced himself to keep writing. What happened to you, Clara? She drew in a shallow breath. It was winter. My father left me alone in the room while he went into town. I woke up in the night because someone was knocking on the door. Soft at first, then louder. I thought it was him, so I opened it. Her voice faltered and she hugged her small frame. But it wasn't. The hum in the walls swelled, agitated. The chandelier above the library creaked, its crystals clinking softly. What was it? Michael asked, barely above a whisper. Clara's gaze lifted wide and hollow. The hotel. The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Michael's pen slipped slightly, a dark smear across the page. Clara's expression grew distant. I don't remember much after that. Just being pulled inside the walls. Darkness everywhere. I screamed for my father, but the hotel was louder. And then, I wasn't me anymore. I was part of it. The temperature dropped sharply. Michael's breath fogged faintly, his heart thudding. He wanted to reach out to comfort her, but he knew instinctively that the wrong move might shatter the fragile thread holding her voice in place. He scribbled her words with urgency, each letter an act of defiance. You remember now. You're Clara. You had a father who loved you. You played games. You laughed. You lived." The girl's eyes glistened with tears. "If you write it down, will it stay? Will I stay?" Michael's throat tightened. "Yes, your story will stay. They can't erase it anymore." For a moment, hope flickered across her pale face, fragile but real. She reached for him, her small fingers brushing the edge of the notebook. The marble in his pocket pulsed faintly, as though recognizing the act. Then abruptly, the library door slammed shut with a thunderous crack. The sound echoed, rattling the shelves, sending dust spilling from the rafters. Clara gasped, stepping back, her face twisting with sudden fear. "They know," she whispered. "They know you're listening to me." The hum rose into a low growl, the floor trembling beneath Michael's feet. Shadows seeped from the corners of the room, stretching long, thin, claw-like fingers across the floorboards. Clara clutched at him. "Don't let them take me back." Michael stood the notebook in one hand, his other reaching instinctively into his pocket for the marble. Its glow flared faintly, casting pale light across the shadows. They hissed, recoiling, but did not vanish. Michael's voice rang out firm despite the terror crawling his spine. "Her name is Clara. She lived. She loved. She is not yours." The shadows shuddered, pressing harder, wrapping the library in suffocating dark. Books fell from shelves, spines cracking pages, scattering like snow. Clara cried out, her small frame flickering, fading, as though the hotel itself tried to swallow her voice. Michael dropped to his knees, scrawling her name in bold strokes across the page over and over. Clara Whitfield. Clara Whitfield. Clara Whitfield. The glow from the marble flared brighter, the letters on the page burning into permanence. Clara's form steadied her sobs, softening. She looked at him with wide, grateful eyes. "You remembered me," she whispered. The shadows shrieked in fury, recoiling all at once, vanishing into cracks in the walls. The hum fractured into silence, and Clara, like Daniel, was gone. Only Michael remained crouched on the dusty floor of the library, notebook trembling in his hands, the marble still glowing faintly in his pocket. He exhaled shakily, closing his eyes. He had freed another. But each act pulled him deeper, bound him tighter. The Stanley did not like to lose what it kept, and it had many more rooms. The silence after Clara vanished felt heavier than before, as though the hotel had swallowed its own fury and was now plotting in the dark. Dust hung in the library's air like ash after a fire, each mote illuminated by a sliver of light breaking through the curtains. Michael remained on the floor for some time, his knees aching against the wood, his breath uneven. The notebook lay open before him, the last page scarred by the frantic repetition of Clara's name. His handwriting, sharp and desperate, stared back at him like a message scrawled in haste before execution. He ran a trembling hand down the page, the grooves of the letters etched deep into the paper. Daniel, Clara, 2 children, 2 stories, both remembered, both gone or freed. He wanted to believe that. He needed to. The marble in his pocket pulsed, once faint but deliberate, as if acknowledging his thoughts. It no longer felt cold, not entirely. Warmth threaded through it, now subtle but real, like an ember resisting ash. Michael rose slowly, the old floor groaning beneath his weight. He gathered the fallen books scattered by the hotel's rage, sliding them back into place, though his hands shook. The hum was gone for now, but its absence was worse, like the stillness of a predator hidden in brush waiting. He knew he couldn't stop. If Clara was right, there were more, many more, and the Stanley would not surrender them easily. Leaving the library, he stepped into the hall, the polished wood gleaming faintly in the afternoon light. Guests passed by, unaware, their chatter and footsteps strangely thin against the weight that pressed on Michael's chest. How many of them felt the hum? How many noticed the watchful shadows? He drifted toward the grand staircase, pausing at the landing, where a vast portrait hung an oil painting of the hotel in its prime, framed in gold. For the first time, he noticed faint figures painted on the veranda, children in early 1900s clothing, playing with hoops and marbles. He leaned closer. Their faces were indistinct, blurred with brushstrokes, but the shapes of their small bodies felt uncomfortably real. His pulse quickened. Had those figures always been there? Or had the hotel revealed them now, knowing he would see? Mr. Anderson, the voice startled him. He turned sharply to find the same older woman from before, her cardigan buttoned high, her sharp eyes fixed on him. She seemed less spectral than the children, grounded real, but the way she moved was too quiet, as though the building muffled her deliberately. "You found another," she said simply, not asking, only stating. Michael's grip on the notebook tightened. "Clara," the woman nodded. Her cries were softer than Daniel's, easier for the hotel to bury. But she lingered. They all linger. Michael's throat felt dry. "How many are there?" Her gaze flicked toward the ceiling, her mouth pressed thin. "More than you can write before the hotel decides you've gone too far." Michael swallowed hard, his voice low. "Why me?" The woman stepped closer, her eyes glinting with something between pity and warning. "Because you listen. Most guests hear the cries, feel the chill, and bury it in superstition. But you followed. You asked. You remembered. That makes you dangerous to this place, and it makes you bound to it." Her words struck deep, echoing the unease already nesting in Michael's chest. "I don't want to be bound," he said hoarsely. She studied him, her expression softening. "Then you must decide. Do you keep writing and risk never leaving? Or do you close the book and abandon them to silence?" Michael looked down at the notebook, its blank pages heavy with expectation. The marble pulsed faintly again, warm, now urging. His fingers tightened on the cover. "I can't stop," he admitted. "Not now." The woman's eyes darkened. "Then you must be ready. Each story you free will make the hotel fight harder. It will not give them up willingly." She reached into her pocket, pulling free a small silver locket. Pressing it into his hand, she whispered, "You'll need this when the others come." Michael glanced down at the locket, its surface etched with worn initials. It was warm to the touch, thrumming faintly, almost like the marble. He looked up to ask what it was, but the woman was gone. The hallway stretched empty, the only movement the sway of the chandelier above. He exhaled sharply, sliding the locket into his pocket beside the marble. 2 tokens now, both humming faintly against him. The Stanley groaned low and warning, as if aware of what he carried, and in the hush that followed, Michael thought he heard them voices, dozens of them thin and overlapping, rising from the walls themselves, crying, whispering, waiting. He tightened his grip on the notebook. So many rooms, he thought, and everyone with a story that demanded to be written. The whispers followed Michael through the corridors, faint and overlapping, never quite forming words, but never fading either. Each turn he took, each hallway, he crossed, the sound pressed closer, as though the walls themselves leaned in to murmur their secrets into his ear. By dusk, the hotel seemed transformed again. The easy brightness of afternoon had drained away shadows stretching long across the carpets, sconces flickering faintly. Guests gathered in the dining hall, their laughter and voices a fragile shield against the weight pressing from above. Michael lingered near the back notebook in hand food untouched. His eyes scanned the faces of strangers, wondering how many of them sensed the undercurrent pulsing beneath their evening chatter. The marble in his pocket stirred, pulsing faintly, joined by the quiet thrum of the silver locket. He placed a hand against both, steadying himself. The tokens seemed to react whenever the hotel stirred proof that he was not imagining what lived in these halls. After dinner, he returned to his room. The air was cool, the curtains drawn against the twilight outside. He sat at the desk, opening the notebook to Clara's final words. You remembered me. The page seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight, the letters etched so deeply into the paper that they felt carved. Michael pressed the pencil to a blank page, uncertain. He didn't need to wait. The voices were already circling him, restless, hungry. He could hear the crying again, soft and low, threading beneath the hum. But this time it was not Daniel, not Clara. It was deeper, older. The floor creaked behind him. Michael turned quickly. A young man stood in the corner, tall, thin, his clothing outdated slacks, suspenders a collarless shirt. His hair was dark, his eyes hollow but steady. He didn't weep like Daniel, nor tremble like Clara. He simply stared. Michael's breath caught. Who are you? The young man's voice was quiet, resonant, carrying a weight beyond his years. Thomas. Michael froze. He had seen the name in the ledger. 17 years old. No departure recorded. Thomas Whitlock, the figure said, as if hearing his thoughts. I've waited a long time. Michael raised the notebook instinctively. You want me to write your story? Thomas's gaze sharpened. Yes, but mine is not like the children's. Mine is not innocence stolen. Mine is punishment. The words chilled him. Michael steadied his pencil. Tell me. Thomas stepped closer, his movements deliberate. I came here in 1927. I was 17, restless, reckless. My parents brought me here to straighten me out. They thought the quiet would tame me. They didn't know the hotel doesn't tame. It consumes. Michael wrote quickly, each stroke feeling heavier than the last. Thomas's eyes darkened. One night, I snuck out. I heard whispers in the hall, promises of things I thought I wanted: freedom, adventure, pleasure. The hotel gave me doors to open one after another. Behind each one, something I couldn't resist. I followed until I was lost. The room seemed to pulse, shadows shifting against the walls as Thomas spoke. Michael's pencil scratched faster. I realized too late. Thomas' continued, voice tightening. The whispers weren't leading me out. They were leading me in. Deeper. Until the hallways closed around me and the doors vanished. There was no way back. His jaw clenched. And I've been walking them ever since. The lamp on the desk flickered violently, the bulb buzzing with strain. Michael pressed on his hand, cramping. You remember now? If I write it down, they can't keep you. Thomas's gaze flicked toward the notebook, then back to Michael. Do you believe that? Michael hesitated. He thought of Daniel, of Clara. They had disappeared, their names secured in ink. He wanted to believe they were free. But were they? Or had the hotel simply drawn him deeper, binding him with every word? I have to, he whispered. Thomas stepped closer, his presence looming, shadows bending around him. Then write faster. They're coming. The hum surged. The desk rattled. The window panes trembled in their frames. Michael scrawled Thomas's name again and again, sealing it into the page. Thomas Whitlock. Thomas Whitlock. Thomas Whitlock. The young man shuddered, his form flickering. His hollow eyes softened, filled with something that might have been relief. I remember who I was, he murmured. You gave me back my name. The marble flared bright in Michael's pocket, joined by a sudden heat from the locket. The shadows recoiled, retreating from the corners of the room. And then Thomas was gone. Michael sat back, chest heaving, sweat dampening his brow. The notebook lay open. Another name, etched deep. Another story, pulled from silence. But the hotel wasn't finished. He could feel it pressing harder, restless, hungry. The whispers grew louder in the walls. Not one voice, not two, but dozens. Michael closed the notebook, gripping it tightly to his chest. So many rooms, he thought again. And this time the words were not just his own. Michael hardly slept that night. When his eyes closed, the whispers threaded into his dreams, pulling him through endless corridors of the Stanley. Doors stretched on forever, each marked with names he could almost but not quite read. Each time he tried to open one, the knob burned cold against his palm, and the hum of the hotel thundered through his skull until he woke, gasping. By dawn his body felt heavy, but his mind refused rest. The notebook lay on the desk beside the marble and the silver locket, its pages filled with hurried handwriting. Daniel's innocence, Clara's sorrow, Thomas's regret. 3 voices remembered, 3 names carved into permanence. Yet instead of easing the weight pressing on him, seemed to grow heavier, as though the more he freed, the more the hotel demanded. When he finally ventured into the hall, the air felt different. Guests bustled about in their morning routines. Children darted past, laughter echoing, but their joy felt paper-thin, brittle against the oppressive stillness that clung to the wallpaper and seeped into the carpet. Michael descended the main staircase. His eyes drifted to the painting again, the veranda crowded with children. Now, unmistakably, 3 of the blurred figures were sharper. Daniel with his marble, Clara in her white dress, Thomas tall with shadows clinging to his frame. His stomach turned. Were they free? Or had the hotel simply absorbed them deeper, memorializing their faces in its endless canvas of memory? He tore his gaze away and moved toward the reception desk. The young clerk on duty smiled politely. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson. Sleep well." Michael hesitated, studying her. She was young, early 20s, her smile warm, but her eyes didn't quite reach him. They were distant, glassy, as though she were listening to something else entirely. "Do you ever hear them?" Michael asked quietly. Her smile faltered. "Sir." The children he pressed, crying, whispering through the walls. For a heartbeat, her eyes flickered with something sharp, something aware. Then she straightened mask, slipping back into place. "We pride ourselves on our quiet evenings here, Mr. Anderson. If you're hearing disturbances, perhaps you'd like to change rooms." Michael's skin prickled. The hum stirred faintly under her words, as though she were not speaking for herself. He forced a thin smile. "No, that won't be necessary." She nodded politely, gaze already sliding past him to another guest. But Michael walked away with certainty burning in his chest. The staff knew. Whether they admitted it or not, they were part of the hotel's silence, complicit in keeping the cries unheard. By afternoon, he found himself drawn again to the forgotten wings of the building. The air grew colder as he walked, lamps dimmer, the carpet more worn. Dust thickened the scent of mildew curling faintly in the corners. Here, guests never came. Here the hum was louder. At the end of one hall, a door stood half open. Michael paused, his pulse quickening. He stepped closer, pushing it open with the edge of his hand. Inside was a room long abandoned. Wallpaper peeled from the walls, exposing lath beneath. A single iron bed frame leaned against one corner, its mattress long gone. The window was cracked, a thin whistle of wind sliding through. And on the floor, drawn in chalk, was a circle. Small, uneven, the kind a child might scrawl in secret. Inside it lay stones, buttons, bits of broken toys. Offerings. Michael crouched, staring. His chest tightened. A makeshift altar, a child's attempt to hold on to something when everything else had been taken. A voice drifted behind him, soft and tremulous. "That was mine." Michael turned sharply. A boy stood in the doorway, no older than 10. His hair was dark, his eyes solemn, his clothing plain. He stepped inside carefully, as if afraid the circle might break. Michael's breath hitched. "What's your name?" The boy lowered his gaze. "Eli." Michael's hand went to his notebook, instinctively flipping to a blank page. "Tell me, Eli. Tell me your story." The boy knelt by the circle, touching one of the stones with reverence. His voice quivered. "I didn't want to forget my friends. They cried and then they were gone. So I made this circle. I thought if I kept pieces of them here, the hotel couldn't take them all away. Michael's pencil moved furiously. And did it work? Eli's eyes shimmered. For a while. But then the hotel found me. It told me I had to stay. It whispered to me in the night. Said if I stepped outside the circle, I'd be lost forever. The air grew colder, the hum louder. The walls rippled faintly, shadows pressing against them. Michael's chest tightened. And what happened? Eli's voice broke. I got tired. I stepped out. The marble flared in Michael's pocket, joined by the locket's thrum. Shadows began to seep across the floor, inching toward the circle. Michael dropped to his knees beside the boy notebook, open voice fierce. Not this time. Tell me everything. I'll remember. I'll keep you. Eli's lips trembled. You can't fight them all. Michael wrote harder, his voice low but steady. Maybe not. But I can fight for you. The chalk circle began to glow faintly. Stones and buttons shimmering in pale light. The shadows hissed, recoiling, pressing against the walls. Eli looked at him, tears slipping down his cheeks. You'll remember me. Michael nodded, his pencil moving in frantic strokes. I'll remember Eli. I'll write it all. And as the chalk burned brighter, the boy's figure wavered, then steadied, his face softening into something almost peaceful. The hotel groaned in fury, the hum rising into a roar, and Michael realized with bone-deep certainty that the Stanley was not just watching anymore. It was hunting him. The roar subsided into silence, but it was not relief. It was the breathless pause before a predator strikes. The chalk circle still glowed faintly on the floor, its stones and buttons vibrating softly as though clinging to life. Eli knelt within it, his small frame trembling, his eyes fixed on Michael with fragile hope. You'll keep me safe, he whispered, voice breaking on the word safe. Michael nodded, pressing his pencil harder to the page. I'll keep you remembered. That's stronger than safety. The boy's tears glistened in the faint glow. If they erase me, I'll vanish forever. I don't want to vanish. You won't. Michael's words were firm, even as his chest tightened with doubt. I'll write you into the world again. He scrawled Eli's name across the paper over and over, anchoring it into permanence. Each stroke of graphite seemed to push the shadows back, each repetition, carving defiance into the silence. The marble in his pocket pulsed brightly, joined by the silver locket's faint hum. Together, they seemed to shield him, thin but resolute. Eli's figure steadied his breathing, calming as the chalk circle brightened. I used to play with my sister, he murmured, voice soft, memory stirring. We'd trade marbles. She gave me her favorite one, blue with a white streak. I kept it in my pocket every night. Until they took it. Michael's chest tightened. The marble. Was it his or Daniel's ore? Had the hotel stolen from many, binding all their memories into this single glass sphere? He wrote quickly, Eli had a sister. He played marbles with her. He remembered love. The boy smiled faintly, though sorrow shadowed his eyes. I can almost hear her voice again. I can almost see her. The chalk circle flickered brighter. But then, without warning, one of the stones cracked, splitting clean in two. The glow faltered. Eli gasped, clutching at the edges of the circle. They're angry, he cried. They know you're writing me down. The walls shuttered wallpaper, peeling in jagged strips. From the corners of the room, black tendrils seeped out, writhing like smoke with weight. They pressed against the chalk line, recoiling when touched by its glow. But they grew thicker, stronger, relentless. Michael Rowe's notebook clutched in one hand, the other wrapped tightly around the marble. His voice rang out over the hum, fierce, defiant. His name is Eli. He had a sister. He is not yours to erase. The tendrils hissed, pressing harder, splintering the floorboards. The chalk line cracked again, light sputtering. Eli's form flickered, panic flooding his face. "Don't let them take me," he screamed. Michael dropped to his knees beside him, thrusting the marble into the boy's hand. The glass flared light bursting outward in a wave that pushed the shadows back. Eli gasped, his figure solidifying, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's mine," he whispered. "You brought it back." Michael blinked. "This marble, it's yours." Eli clutched it to his chest, nodding fiercely. "They took it when they took me. But it's mine." The glow spread from the marble into the chalk circle, mending its cracks, weaving light through every stone and button. The shadows screamed, retreating violently into the walls, the hum breaking into a fractured wail. Eli turned to Michael, tears streaking his cheeks. "I can go now. I can find her." Michael's breath trembled. "Go, Eli. Be free." The boy smiled softly, his form fading into the glow until only the chalk circle remained, smoldering faintly, like embers, before cooling into silence. The room was still again, save for the pounding of Michael's heart. The marble was gone from his pocket, gone from the floor. Returned. He staggered to his feet, gripping the notebook tight. 3 children, 1 young man. 4 stories remembered. 4 names carved into permanence. But the Stanley would not forgive this. He could feel it in the way the floor vibrated beneath his feet, the way the silence pressed against his ears like hands. As he left the ruined room, stepping back into the hall, the chandelier above flickered. He looked up, dread tightening his chest. The painted figures on the grand portrait had changed again. Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, all sharp, now distinct, staring outward from the canvas with solemn eyes. And behind them, blurred, countless others waited. The hotel was showing him the truth. There were more, so many more, and the Stanley would not give them up without a fight. Michael stumbled back from the portrait, his pulse thundering in his ears. 4 faces stared out at him now. Daniel with his marble, Clara in her frayed white dress, Thomas sharp-shouldered and solemn, Eli clutching something close to his chest. They had been blurred before, but the brushstrokes were crisp now, undeniable, as though the canvas itself had shifted overnight to record his interference. Behind them, the others were still hazy, their outlines faint smudges waiting to be seen. Waiting for him. The marble's absence weighed on him like a missing tooth, its familiar pulse gone. He touched the locket instead, feeling its faint thrum against his fingertips. Not cold, not warm, simply alive. The hum threaded through the hallway, subtle, steady, almost taunting. The Stanley was no longer hiding its awareness. It was showing him the scope of its reach, daring him to continue. Michael pressed the notebook tight against his chest. "I can't stop now," he thought. "If I stop, they vanish forever." That night, he didn't return to his room. Instead, he wandered the oldest wings of the hotel corridors that smelled of mildew and dust, where the carpet frayed and lamps flickered low. These were the forgotten spaces, untouched by the laughter of modern guests, where the hotel's hunger was naked and restless. He carried the locket in one hand, the notebook in the other. His footsteps echoed softly, and with each turn he swore he saw movement at the edge of his vision. Small figures ducking into doorways, shadows skittering just beyond reach. At the end of one hall, he found another door standing slightly ajar. Light spilled faintly from within, a golden glow that pulsed like candlelight. He pushed it open. Breath held. The room was furnished, but strange, as though preserved in amber. A wooden crib sat in the corner, lace canopy yellowed with age. A rocking chair swayed gently, though no one sat in it. On the dresser, a porcelain doll lay cracked, one glass eye missing. And in the crib, a baby cried. The sound was small, high-pitched, aching. Michael froze, dread crawling up his spine. The cries wavered, growing softer, then rising again, relentless. He stepped closer, peering into the crib. No child lay there, only a folded blanket worn thin with time. Yet the crying continued, echoing from the fabric itself. Michael's throat tightened. He opened the notebook hand, trembling. "Who are you?" he whispered. The air stirred cold, brushing his cheek. The crying shifted, morphing into a faint, whispering voice. "Lydia." The word was fragile, barely formed. A name. Michael wrote it quickly, Lydia. The baby in the crib. The crying wavered, softening. The blanket stirred faintly as though touched by unseen hands. "Tell me," Michael urged, gently, voice breaking. "Tell me your story." The whisper grew stronger, threading through the room. "I was born here. My mother said the hotel would be safe. She left me for a moment. Just a moment." The voice cracked into another cry. "But when she came back, I was gone." Michael's chest ached, his pencil pressing harder into the page. "They took you." The hum surged, walls trembling. The rocking chair slammed backward, crashing into the wall with violent force. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The voice wailed, "They kept me. They never let me leave." Michael gritted his teeth, scrawling the words as the crib rattled violently, its wooden frame groaning. "Your name is Lydia. You were loved. You had a mother who wanted to protect you. You are not theirs." The locket in his hand pulsed suddenly, heat flooding his palm. The initials etched into its silver face glowed faintly. With trembling fingers, Michael opened it. Inside was a lock of hair, pale and fine. Infant hair. He gasped, "Lydia, this was yours." The cries faltered, softening into a coo. Then silence. The blanket shimmered faintly, the outline of a small hand pressing briefly against the fabric before fading away. The hum cracked, faltered, then roared in fury. The crib splintered, collapsing in on itself, wood snapping like bones. The rocking chair burst into flame, vanishing in a hiss of smoke. But Lydia's voice whispered one last time, "Steady now, I am remembered." Then the room fell still. Michael stood shaking, notebook pressed to his chest, the locket cooling slowly in his hand. He had freed another. But this time the retaliation was harsher, violent. The hotel was lashing out now, desperate. As he turned back into the hallway, he felt it more strongly than ever, the weight of unseen eyes in every corner, the simmering hunger in the walls. The Stanley was losing ground, but it would not surrender. The portrait in the main hall would show Lydia's face now. He was sure of it. And behind her, the blurred figures waited, countless and patient. The Stanley had many rooms, and each one held another story that demanded to be told. By the time Michael reached the main hall again, the hotel was hushed in its evening lull. Guests lingered at the bar, glasses clinking faintly, their conversations light and unbothered. None of them felt the weight that pressed on him, the awareness that grew heavier with each story freed. He stopped before the great portrait once more. The paint had changed. Lydia was there now, an infant swaddled in her blanket, nestled between Clara and Daniel. The brush strokes captured her with haunting clarity, her tiny hand raised as though reaching outward. Michael's stomach twisted. Each time he remembered one of them, each time he spoke their name into permanence, the hotel etched them deeper into itself. Was he freeing them or binding them tighter? The marble was gone. The locket throbbed faintly in his pocket, its silver warm against his leg, as though it still carried Lydia's breath. The notebook grew heavier with each page, filled its weight, unnatural, as though the names inside pulled gravity toward themselves. He climbed the stairs to his room, his body aching with exhaustion. But when he closed the door behind him, he didn't feel safe. The air was too thick, too aware. The hum pressed at the walls like a hand cupping his skull. He sat at the desk, flipping the notebook open. 5 names now: Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, Lydia. Each etched in frantic strokes as though the act of writing them had carved grooves into reality itself. He traced Lydia's name with his finger, the paper rough raised. The lamp flickered. Michael looked up, heart hammering. The shadows stretched long across the room, crawling up the walls like vines. He gripped the notebook tightly, pulling the locket into his hand. "Not tonight," he whispered, defiant. "Not again." But the hotel did not listen. The walls rippled the wallpaper, bulging outward. Shapes pressed against it from the inside, hands, faces, mouths, stretching silently before vanishing again. The hum rose into a deep growl, vibrating through the floorboards. Then from the far corner came a soft sound. Not crying this time. Humming, a melody. Michael froze. It was faint, sweet, almost soothing, the kind of tune a mother might hum while rocking a child. It floated through the air, weaving between the groans of the building. "Who's there?" he called softly, his voice trembling. The humming stopped. Silence pressed in thicker, tighter. Then slowly, a figure stepped from the shadows. She was tall, slender, dressed in a faded gown that had once been white. Her hair was pinned neatly, though strands had fallen loose. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, yet kind. She looked at him the way a mother might look at a child, tender, sorrowful, endlessly patient. Michael's throat tightened. "Are you Lydia's mother?" The woman tilted her head, expression unreadable. Her lips parted, voice soft, almost a sigh. "I tried to keep her safe. I thought this place would protect us. But I was wrong." Michael's hand shook as he scribbled Lydia's mother. She tried to protect her child. The woman stepped closer, her presence heavy yet gentle. "You're writing their names, their stories." "Yes." Michael's voice cracked. "It's the only way to keep them from vanishing." Her eyes softened, but sorrow lingered. "Be careful. Every story you write becomes part of the Stanley. Even if you free them, the hotel remembers." Michael's stomach dropped. Then, "Am I helping them, or am I helping it?" The woman didn't answer. She reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the notebook. The page fluttered, flipping backward to where Daniel's name was written. Her touch lingered there, tender as though caressing a lost memory. "They were all mine once," she whispered. "All of them." Michael froze. "What do you mean?" Her eyes lifted to meet his. For the first time, he saw anger in them, buried deep beneath the sorrow. "The hotel took my children. Every one. It feeds on them still. I wander these halls searching, but I can never keep them. It always pulls them back." Michael's pulse thundered. "Then how do I stop it?" The woman stepped back, her form flickering at the edges. "You can't stop the Stanley. You can only choose. Either you keep writing until it takes you to, or you close the book and let them fade." Her voice lowered, breaking. "But if you stop, they will be lost forever." The hum surged, violently shaking the room. The woman gasped, her form unraveling like smoke. She reached toward him, her voice sharp with urgency. "Don't let it take you." And then she was gone. The lamp shattered, plunging the room into darkness. The notebook in Michael's hands throbbed like a heartbeat, and for the first time he wondered if the hotel was writing him. The room was swallowed in blackness, the broken lamp a jagged carcass on the desk. Michael sat frozen in the dark, the notebook vibrating faintly in his hands like a living thing. His breath fogged in the air, every exhale loud against the heavy silence. The hum was stronger now, not distant, but inside him, threading through his bones, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He clutched the locket, pressing the silver into his palm until it bit his skin. It was faintly warm, thrumming against him in defiance of the cold. "Don't let it take you." The woman's warning repeated in his head, sharp and desperate. But how could he stop? He had Daniel's eyes in his memory, Clara's trembling voice, Thomas's steady sorrow, Eli's chalk circle, Lydia's cries. He couldn't abandon them. To close the book would be to condemn them to silence. And yet, every page he filled, every name he wrote seemed to make the hotel more alive. Michael drew a shuddering breath, forcing himself to his feet. He reached for the light switch near the door. The bulb flared once, twice, then exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging him into deeper dark. The hum grew louder, and then he heard it knocks. Soft, steady, measured. Not at his door this time, but on the walls themselves. One knock, then another, moving around him, circling the room. His throat closed, breath trapped in his chest. The knocks paused. Then a child's voice whispered from the darkness, close, too close. "Write me down." Michael spun notebook clutched tight. "Who are you?" His voice cracked, his words trembling. Another voice from behind, "Don't forget me." And another from the corner, "My name." "Say my name." The air filled with voices, dozens of them layered and desperate, pressing in from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Whispering, pleading, demanding. The room vibrated with their need. Michael dropped to his knees, flipping the notebook open to a blank page. His pencil scraped furiously, writing words he didn't fully hear, names whispered through his skull. Sarah, William, Annabelle, Jonah, Ruth. Names poured into him, pressed out of him, scrawled across the paper in frantic lines. The voices surged, overlapping in a chorus of grief and longing. The notebook grew heavier with every word, its spine creaking, pages swelling, as though bloated with sorrow. Michael's hand cramped, graphite snapping, but still he wrote, unable to stop, until the hum broke into a roar. The walls cracked, wallpaper splitting, wide black tendrils lashing out into the room. They whipped around him, striking the desk, tearing through the curtains. The floor trembled, boards splintering beneath his knees. The voices screamed a collective wail of desperation and fury. Michael shouted above them, his voice raw. "You are not forgotten. You are not the hotels." The locket in his palm seared with sudden heat, burning his skin. He flung it open in reflex, the lock of infant hair inside glowing with pale light. The tendrils recoiled, shrieking, the hum fracturing into dissonance. The notebook blazed. Every name he had written glowed on the page, burning bright against the dark. The room filled with their light, their voices rising into clarity. "We are remembered." The tendrils snapped back, vanishing into the cracks of the walls. The roar faded. The silence that followed was immense, ringing in his ears. Michael collapsed against the bed-frame chest, heaving sweat chilling on his skin. The notebook lay across his lap, its pages still glowing faintly, the names etched as though carved into stone. But the hum was not gone. It pulsed low, simmering with anger. The Stanley had not yielded. It was waiting, patient, calculating. Michael pressed a hand to his temple, trembling. His vision blurred, the room tilting. His notebook throbbed with weight too heavy now, as though it carried not just the stories of the lost, but pieces of himself. He looked down at the glowing pages and realized with sudden clarity his handwriting was changing. The strokes were not entirely his anymore. Letters twisted, flourished, stretched into shapes he did not recognize. The hotel was writing too, and the story it wanted was his. Michael stared at the page, heart thudding. His own handwriting stared back at him, but it was wrong. The loops stretched too wide, the lines cut too sharp, as though another hand guided his pencil through his own grip. Names bled into one another, letters, twisting, curling, until he couldn't tell if he was still the writer or simply the medium. The notebook pulsed. It felt alive, thrumming against his knees like a heart that wasn't his own. He slammed it shut. The room fell silent. The hum, though still present, dipped lower, softer, almost amused. Michael clenched the book in his hands, his breath ragged. "No," he whispered, "not me. You won't take me." But the silence that followed was thick with mockery, as if the hotel knew better. He pushed himself upright and crossed to the window, yanking the curtains aside. The mountains loomed under moonlight, jagged peaks cutting into the sky. The world beyond the Stanley was still there, quiet, vast, unconcerned. He pressed a trembling hand to the glass, longing for escape. Yet in the reflection, the room behind him did not look the same. The bed was stripped bare. the wallpaper shredded, the floorboards warped, dark stains seeping up like water. Shadows clung to the corners, heavier than the dim light should allow. And sitting on the desk behind him was not his notebook, but dozens of notebooks stacked high, their spines cracked and worn. He spun, breath caught in his throat. The desk was empty, save for his own single book. But the image burned in his mind. Stacks of notebooks, hundreds of them filled with names. The work of others who had come before him. Writers, listeners, guests who had followed the cries too far, and none of them had left. A soft sound drew his attention. The door handle turned. Slowly, Michael backed away, clutching the notebook tight. "No," he muttered. "Not again." The door creaked open. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, gaunt, his suit decades out of fashion. His eyes were sunken, his skin pale, his expression carved from exhaustion. He looked at Michael with a grim recognition. "You're the new one," the man said quietly. His voice was thin, frayed, worn from disuse. Michael's mouth went dry. "Who are you?" The man stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Like you. I heard the cries. I thought I could help. I thought I was strong enough." He nodded at the notebook clutched in Michael's hands. "And the hotel gave me that too." Michael's chest tightened. "You wrote the stories." The man's hollow smile was bitter. "I wrote until there was nothing left of me. And then I kept writing." "The hotel doesn't let you stop." Michael's breath shook. "Where's your notebook now?" The man's smile widened, faintly empty of joy. "You saw them, didn't you?" In the reflection, the image of the stacked books surged back into Michael's mind, the hundreds of spines crowding the desk. He felt his stomach drop. "All yours, not just mine," the man said. His eyes darkened. "All of us. Every guest who listened too closely. Every guest who wrote. We all thought we were saving them. We were feeding it." Michael staggered back, clutching his notebook as though it might bite him. "No. That can't be true. Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, Lydia. They remembered who they were. They spoke their names. They're free." The man's voice was flat, pitying. "Look at the painting. They aren't free. They're part of it now. Just like we are." Michael shook his head, heart pounding. "No, that's not true." The man stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the notebook. "You'll see soon enough. Every word you write feeds the Stanley. Every name you carve into paper becomes another brushstroke on its canvas. It wants you to think you're helping. That's how it keeps you." The locket in Michael's pocket pulsed a faint warmth as though disagreeing. He gripped it tightly, desperate. "Then how do I stop?" The man's hollow smile twisted. "You don't. You only choose whether you keep writing until you disappear, or close the book and let the cries swallow you whole." The hum swelled, rattling the window glass, vibrating the floorboards. The man's figure flickered his form, unraveling into shadow. His voice lingered, sharp and final. "Either way, you belong to it now." And then he was gone. Michael stood alone in the trembling room, the notebook heavy in his hands. The locket throbbed, faint but steady, the only reminder that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. But the hotel pressed in from all sides, patient and hungry, waiting for his choice. Michael sat on the bed with his back pressed hard against the headboard, the notebook heavy in his lap. The silver locket clenched so tight it left half moons in his palm. His chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. The encounter with the gaunt man replayed over and over in his head, his words wrapping around him like a noose. Every word you write feeds the Stanley. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to believe Daniel's smile, Clara's whisper of gratitude, Eli's relief, Lydia's fading handprint on the blanket, all proof that he was helping. But the portrait told a different story. Every face etched sharper, every memory feeding into the hotel's body. The hum was quieter now, almost gentle, like the slow breathing of something content, as if the Stanley were letting him stew in his doubt, knowing that uncertainty would bind him tighter than chains. Michael glanced down at the notebook. Its edges looked darker in the dim light, its spine thicker than before, as though it had swollen in the night. When he touched it, it pulsed faintly. Alive. What if it's both, he thought. What if I'm freeing them and feeding it at the same time? The thought made his stomach turn. A soft knock broke the silence. 3 quick taps, not the slow, deliberate pounding of the shadows. This was lighter, almost human. Michael stood cautious and moved toward the door. Who's there? Silence. Another 3 knocks. He opened the door a crack. The hallway stretched empty, dim sconces flickering. But on the floor just outside the threshold lay something small. A child's shoe. Scuffed leather, the laces frayed. Michael bent slowly, picking it up. It was cold damp, as though pulled from the earth itself. A voice whispered behind him inside the room. Mine. Michael froze. Slowly he turned. A boy stood in the corner. Not Daniel. Not Eli. This one was older, perhaps 12, his face, gaunt eyes shadowed. His clothes were tattered mud caked on the cuffs of his pants. He stared at the shoe in Michael's hand. Michael swallowed hard. What's your name? The boy's lips parted, cracked and dry. Jonah. Michael's hand tightened on the notebook. He opened it to a blank page, pencil trembling. Tell me, Jonah. Tell me your story. Jonah stepped forward, his movements stiff, as though each limb resisted. I worked. My father made me work, carrying bags, sweeping halls. I wasn't a guest. I was staff. His voice cracked. I was just a boy. Michael wrote furiously. Jonah, a child who worked at the hotel. Not a guest. Jonah's eyes glistened. I was tired. Always tired. I wanted to play, to rest. But the hotel doesn't care for rest. It whispers. When you're tired, promises of sleep. I listened, and I fell asleep where I shouldn't have. Michael's pencil slowed. Where? Jonah's gaze dropped to the shoe in Michael's hand. In the basement, near the boiler. His voice trembled. It got too hot, too dark. I couldn't get out. The hum surged through the floorboards, low and furious. Michael scrawled the words, Faster, Jonah. 12. Worked at the Stanley. Died in the boiler room. The shadows rippled along the walls. The air grew stifling heat, pressing against his skin. Michael wiped sweat from his brow, his breath ragged. Jonah stepped closer, eyes wide, pleading. Remember me, please. Don't let it burn me again. The locket pulsed in Michael's palm, the initials on its face glowing faintly. He pressed it to the page, whispering through clenched teeth. Jonah Whitfield. You are not forgotten. The notebook flared, Jonah's name glowing on the paper. The shadows shrieked, recoiling. The heat broke, plunging the room into icy cold. Jonah gasped, his figure wavering. A faint smile touched his lips for the first time. Thank you. And then he was gone. The shoe crumbled in Michael's hand, falling to dust. The notebook cooled, its glow fading. The hum dropped low, resentful but steady. Michael collapsed back onto the bed, drenched in sweat, the notebook pressed to his chest. 6 names now. 6 stories. But the gaunt man's words echoed in his mind, heavy and merciless. Every name you write becomes part of the Stanley. And when Michael closed his eyes, he saw the portrait again. Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, Lydia, Jonah, all sharper, clearer, staring at him with eyes that seemed to ask a question he couldn't answer. Were they free? Or had he bound them forever? Michael woke to the sound of scratching. Not loud, not frantic, steady, measured like a quill moving across parchment. For a moment, disoriented and still half dreaming, He thought it was him, his hand dragging a pencil across the notebook again, unable to stop. But when his eyes snapped open, the notebook was shut tight on the nightstand. The sound continued. He sat up, breath caught in his throat. It was coming from the wall just beside the bed. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause. As though someone or something was writing from inside the plaster. Slowly, cautiously, he leaned closer. The wallpaper rippled under his gaze. Then, with a soft tearing sound, letters began to carve themselves across the faded floral print. Jona. The name etched itself deep, each letter dragged as though by unseen nails. Michael's stomach twisted. He had written Jonah into the notebook only hours ago. Now the hotel was writing him into its walls. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over the bed frame. The hum grew louder, resonant, filling the room like the vibration of a struck bell. The letters on the wall shimmered faintly, burning into permanence. Michael grabbed the notebook, his hands shaking. He flipped it open, staring at the glowing names inside. Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, Lydia, Jonah, all etched in his frantic scrawl. The paper pulsed beneath his fingertips. The gaunt man's warning returned with brutal clarity. Every word you write feeds the Stanley. Michael slammed the book shut. No, he whispered fiercely. You won't take them again. The scratching stopped. The hum quieted. And then in the hush, a new sound. A giggle. Hi, childish bright. Michael spun toward the corner. A little girl stood there. Not Clara. This one was younger. Her braids tied with faded ribbons. Her dress patterned with flowers. She smiled at him wide and innocent, though her eyes glimmered too dark, too knowing. You're good at writing, she said sweetly. Better than the others. Michael's chest tightened. Who are you? She tilted her head, ribbons swaying. Annabelle. The name burned in his ears. He reached for the notebook almost reflexively before catching himself. His hand hovered over the cover, torn. Annabelle's smile widened. Don't you want to remember me? Don't you want to keep me safe? Michael's breath came quick, uneven. Every instinct screamed to resist, to slam the notebook shut and throw it into the fire. But her small frame, her ribbons, her hopeful eyes, they pierced him. He couldn't abandon her. Tell me, he whispered hoarsely. Tell me your story. She stepped closer, her tiny feet silent on the floor. I loved to play games. Hide and seek was my favorite. I was so good at it. I could stay hidden for hours. Her voice softened, almost conspiratorial. But one day, I hid too well. No one found me. And then the hotel did. Michael's throat closed. His pencil trembled against the page. He forced himself to write Annabelle. Loved hide and seek. Lost to the hotel. The hum deepened the floorboards, groaning beneath him. Annabelle's smile didn't falter. I've been hiding ever since, waiting, hoping someone would write me down so I wouldn't disappear. Michael scrawled her name quickly, sealing it to the page. The notebook pulsed, glowing faintly. The hum shuddered, shadows recoiling, but Annabelle only laughed again, soft and lilting. Thank you. Now I'll never be forgotten. Michael looked up, relief trembling through him. But then he saw her eyes. They weren't grateful. They were triumphant. She leaned closer, her breath cold against his ear. The more you write, the stronger it gets. You know that, don't you? Michael's blood ran cold. He staggered back, the notebook trembling in his grip. What are you? Annabelle's giggle echoed sharp as breaking glass. I'm yours now, just like they are. And with that, her form flickered and dissolved, ribbons and all into the shadows that clung to the ceiling. The notebook glowed brighter, Annabelle's name now etched deep beside the others. The hum pulsed, steady, satisfied. Michael sank to the bed, head in his hands. 7 names, 7 stories. And for the first time, he wondered if some of them weren't meant to be freed. Michael did not move for a long time. The notebook lay open on the bed beside him, Annabelle's name glowing faintly like a fresh wound. The room was quiet now, but it was the suffocating kind of quiet. The pause after a scream. The silence that hides teeth. His thoughts spiraled. What if the man was right? What if the hotel isn't just feeding on their sorrow? It's feeding on mine, on my guilt, my desperation to save them. The locket pressed warm against his leg, a faint counterpulse against the notebook's thrum. He touched it absently, clinging to the small heat like an anchor. The portrait downstairs would have changed again. He didn't need to look to know. Annabelle would be there now, ribbons sharp, her painted eyes smiling too brightly. 7 names, and the hotel still wanted more. He pushed off the bed, pacing the room, his breath ragged. No, he muttered. Not like this. I'm not just going to keep feeding it. I have to know, are they free? Or am I binding them deeper? The hum stirred at his words, rising like a chuckle through the walls. Michael's hands shook. He pulled on his coat, pocketed the locket, and shoved the notebook under his arm. If answers existed, they would be in the places the hotel tried hardest to hide. The basement. The thought chilled him. He remembered Jonah's trembling voice, his story of the boiler of heat and darkness, the shoe that had turned to dust in his hands. But if Jonah's story was true, if others had been kept down there, then maybe he'd find proof one way or another. The hallways grew colder as he descended. The polished wood gave way to concrete, the air damp metallic. The light bulbs overhead flickered in long rows, buzzing faintly as though straining to hold back the dark. At the bottom of the stairwell, a heavy door loomed. Michael pressed his hand against it. The metal was warm. Too warm. He hesitated, the memory of Jonah's words clawing at him. It got too hot, too dark. I couldn't get out. The hum pressed against his skull, urging him away. The locket in his pocket pulsed, urging him forward. He pushed the door open. The basement stretched vast, cavernous. Pipes lined the ceiling, dripping rust-stained water. Shadows pooled thick in the corners. At the far end, the great boiler squatted like a beast, its surface scarred with black soot, its metal belly exhaling waves of heat. Michael stepped inside, notebook tight against his chest. His footsteps echoed too loudly, swallowed almost instantly by the damp air. He stopped when he saw them. Notebooks, dozens, hundreds, piled high on rusted shelves, stacked along the walls, scattered across the floor. Their spines cracked, their pages swollen with age and damp. Michael's stomach lurched. These were real, not reflections, not illusions. Hundreds of books just like his. He crouched, picking one up. The cover was warped, the paper yellowed. Inside, the scrawl of handwriting filled every page. Names, stories, memories. The script changed from page to page, some neat, some frantic, some smeared with tears. He dropped it, hands trembling. He grabbed another, and another. Everyone the same. Stories carved into permanence. Stories never freed. The man's voice echoed in his skull. All of us, every guest who wrote, we all thought we were saving them. We were feeding it. Michael staggered back, breath ragged. The weight of it pressed on him, the generations of writers, of listeners, all trapped, their work devoured by the Stanley. Their voices merged into the hum. His notebook throbbed in his hands, the latest addition to the pile. He wanted to throw it into the boiler, watch it burn, end it. But the locket seared suddenly in his pocket, heat biting his skin. He yanked it out. The initials glowed bright and urgent, and faintly from the notebooks around him, voices rose. Don't stop. We're still here. You can't leave us. The sound grew, hundreds of whispers weaving together into a chorus, rising louder, pressing closer. Michael clutched his head, the notebook pressed to his chest, his ears ringing. What do you want from me? He shouted. The boiler groaned. The hum deepened into a roar, and the voices answered in unison, sharp and unyielding. Right. The roar reverberated through the cavernous basement, shaking the pipes, until water dripped faster, plinking in frantic rhythm. against the concrete floor. Michael staggered back, the chorus of voices slamming into his skull. Right, right, right. The word was no longer suggestion. It was command. His grip tightened around the notebook knuckles, pale. The weight of it pulsed like a living thing against his chest. He could feel the hotel's hunger in it, a vast emptiness demanding to be filled. No, he rasped, shaking his head. Not like this. But the voices pressed harder, overlapping, urgent, pleading, furious. Don't stop. Don't let us fade. Don't forget us. Write us down. Remember. Michael spun eyes darting across the shelves of rotting books, the piles of swollen spines. Each one seemed to whisper on its own the sound of countless pens scratching endless names etched into endless pages. He felt dizzy, trapped in a cyclone of memory not his own. His knees buckled. He dropped to the floor, the notebook falling open on the damp concrete. Its pages glowed faintly, names burning through the paper. Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, Lydia, Jonah, Annabelle. The light spilled outward, illuminating the nearest pile of old journals. And then he saw them, faces, not drawn, not written, but pressed into the pages as though the weight of stories had burned their images into the paper. Faint outlines of eyes, mouths, children's hands, hundreds of them staring from the open books. Michael's breath came in sharp gasps. "You're not free," he whispered. "None of you are free." The voices surged, a storm of desperation. "We are remembered. That is enough. That is all we have." He staggered up, pressing his back against the wall. The heat from the boiler seared across the room, waves of suffocating warmth. His eyes flicked to it, the massive iron belly glowing faintly red through its seams. A thought clawed its way up from his gut, dangerous, impossible. What if I burn the notebook? What if I burn all of them? The hum shuddered at the thought, walls vibrating with fury. Shadows leapt across the floor, writhing toward him, pressing closer. The locket seared in his hand, its silver glowing white-hot. His body trembled under its heat, but he refused to let go. He held it aloft, the glow forcing the shadows back. "I'm not your writer," Michael shouted, voice hoarse, breaking. "I'm not your pen." The voices shrieked in unison, louder than before, filling every crack of the basement. The books rattled on their shelves, pages fluttering in a furious storm. The boiler groaned metal, straining its red glow, brightening. Michael clutched the notebook, staring down at its trembling pages. His mind split in two. One side screamed to keep writing, to free the cries, to give them voice. The other demanded he destroy it, end the chain, burn it all, even if it meant erasing Daniel, Clara, Lydia, the rest. He fell to his knees before the boiler, the notebook in his hands, the heat blistering his skin. Shadows writhed around him, screaming, clawing, desperate to stop him. The locket's glow flared brighter, shielding him in a bubble of light. He pressed the notebook toward the furnace hatch. The metal handle burned against his palm, searing his flesh, but he forced it open. A flood of blistering air rushed out, the stench of charred iron and ash overwhelming. The voices reached a fever pitch, shrieking, begging, commanding, Don't forget us! Don't silence us! Don't erase us!" Michael's arms shook violently as he held the notebook over the fire. His vision blurred, his heart hammering. "Are you free?" he screamed, voice breaking. "Or are you part of this thing?" No answer. Only the cacophony of voices twisting into chaos, some begging for release, others laughing, mocking. The hum thundered, the Stanley itself roaring through the stone and steel. Michael teetered on the edge, notebook trembling above the flames. Every instinct fought within him, save them, end them, save them, end them, until he no longer knew which voice was his. And in the chaos, one voice rose above the rest. Small, fragile. Michael. He froze. It wasn't the hotel. It wasn't the chorus. It was Daniel. Soft, sorrowful, steady. "Don't leave us," the boy whispered. "Please, not like this." Michael's hands shook, tears burning his eyes. He couldn't do it. He couldn't burn them. Not Daniel. Not Clara. Not any of them. With a broken cry, he yanked the notebook back from the flames. The shadows shrieked triumphantly, the hum rising, vibrating through his bones. The boiler roared, the fire surging higher, as if mocking his weakness. Michael clutched the notebook to his chest, sobbing. Then, what do I do? What do you want from me? The voices swelled, crashing together into a single answer that shook the basement-rattling pipes and stone. Right. Michael stumbled back from the furnace chest, heaving the notebook pressed hard against his ribs, as though it might otherwise leap into the flames on its own. His palms were blistered red and raw, the heat still gnawing at his skin. The locket cooled in his pocket, its glow fading to a dull pulse, as if it too mourned the choice he had made. The voices quieted, but they did not leave. They slithered through the walls, their whispers circling him in the dark. Right, right, right. Some voices begged, others commanded, others laughed with cruel satisfaction. He dragged himself toward the stairs, one hand gripping the banister each step, a battle against the gravity of the Stanley's hunger. When he finally emerged into the hall, the air was thinner, cooler, but the hum lingered, vibrating faintly through the soles of his feet. Michael collapsed onto a chair in the deserted corridor, sweat soaking his shirt, his notebook still pulsing faintly in his arms. He let his head drop back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. If I can't destroy it, then I have to finish it. The thought struck like a hammer blow, inevitable, terrible. The hotel wasn't going to let him leave, not while the cries still echoed, and the cries would never stop until every story was told. He pressed a trembling hand to the cover of the notebook. "You want me to be your writer?" he whispered, voice hoarse. "Then I'll write. But I'll write my way." The hum stirred deep and low like laughter buried in stone. By morning, the portrait had changed again. He knew before he even went down the stairs, dread already gnawing at his stomach. When he reached the landing, his knees nearly buckled. Annabelle's ribbons shone sharp among the painted crowd. Jonah stood with soot on his face, Clara with her frayed hem. Lydia with her tiny hand lifted Eli, clutching his marble. Thomas watching with hollow eyes, Daniel's sadness woven into his painted gaze. 7 pairs of eyes now stared back at him. Real. Present. Each brushstroke a brand of memory and possession. Guests bustled past, admiring the old grandeur of the Stanley, but none of them looked at the painting long enough to notice. None of them saw how the faces shifted when the light changed, how the eyes followed, with subtle, impossible precision. Michael stood rooted before it, his notebook heavy in his hands, his mind a whirlpool of dread. A voice drifted to his ear, low and calm. "They're waiting for the rest." Michael turned. The older woman in the cardigan stood beside him again, her sharp eyes softened with pity. He swallowed, throat raw. "How many?" Her gaze lingered on the portrait, her mouth pressed thin. "As many as there are rooms, as many as there are walls. The Stanley has been feeding for over a century." Michael's pulse quickened. "Then it'll never end." The woman looked at him sharply. "No, not for you." He clutched the notebook tighter, the names inside burning in his mind. "What happens to me if I finish it?" Her lips curved faintly, though not with kindness. "Then you'll know what the others learned too late. The Stanley doesn't just keep their stories." She leaned closer, her whisper slicing the air. "It keeps the storytellers." Michael's chest tightened, a cold fist squeezing his lungs. He thought of the gaunt man, his hollow warning, the stacks of journals rotting in the basement, the endless voices in the walls. The woman straightened her eyes, locking onto his. "You've already written too much to leave. Your story is theirs now, and theirs is yours." She turned and walked away, her cardigan vanishing into the crowd of guests. Michael stood frozen before the portrait, his reflection caught among the painted faces. For a terrible instant, he thought he saw his own features blurred in the background, half-formed, waiting to sharpen. He staggered back, shaking his head. No, not me. Not yet. But the hum followed him up the stairs, patient and steady, and in his notebook, the blank pages whispered softly, insistently, calling him back to the desk. Right, always right. Michael did not go back to his room immediately. He wandered the halls, instead, notebook pressed under his arm like contraband. Guests passed him with polite nods, oblivious to the weight of what he carried, oblivious to the pulse that beat faintly through its cover. The Stanley looked ordinary to them, an old hotel full of quirks and creaks, charming in its imperfection. But for Michael, every sound carried intent. Every door whispered. Every chandelier seemed to sway in rhythm with the hum that had burrowed into his skull. He ended up in the music room. It was empty, the grand piano covered in a sheet, the chandeliers dim. Dust hung in the slanted beams of afternoon light. He sat at the bench, laying the notebook across the keys, his hands trembling above it. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered. "If I keep writing, I'll become part of it. If I stop, they'll vanish." The hum rose, faintly curling through the strings of the piano. They thrummed, once low and mournful, as if the hotel itself had pressed a single key. Michael's jaw clenched. "What do you want from me?" Silence. Then another note higher, this time vibrating through the covered instrument. He understood. Not what, who. The cries began again. Soft, scattered. Not a chorus this time, but a single thread of sound drifting through the room. He turned his head sharply, scanning the corners. A boy stood in the far shadow, no older than 8. He wore knickerbockers and suspenders, his shirt torn at the sleeve. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with something brighter than the other's anger. Michael swallowed, reaching for the pencil. "Your name?" The boy's lips curled. "Ruthven." Michael froze, the tip of the pencil hovering over the page. "Ruthven." The boy stepped closer, his voice sharp. "That was my name. But they called me Ruth. They laughed when I told them not to." His small fists clenched. So I made them stop laughing. Michael's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" The boy's gaze darkened. "I pushed one of them down the stairs. He never got up. The hotel liked that. It whispered to me after. Said I was strong. Said I belonged here." The hum surged, approving, deep and steady. Michael's pencil shook. Not all of them are innocents, he realized. Some were swallowed because they were weak. Others, because the hotel saw in them something it could use. Ruthven stepped closer, his expression hard. "You'll write me, won't you? You'll make sure I'm remembered. Not as a joke, not as Ruth, as Ruthven." Michael hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to. To write this boy's name was to carve cruelty into permanence. But the notebook pulsed in his hand, urging, demanding. Ruthven tilted his head, a smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. "If you don't, I'll make the hotel show you what I did. I'll make you hear his bones crack every night." Michael's stomach churned. His pencil scraped reluctantly across the page. Ruthven. Not Ruth. The boy who pushed another to his death. The name glowed faintly. The hum deepened in satisfaction. Ruthven's form steadied, his smile widening. "Good. Now, I'll never be forgotten." Michael slammed the notebook shut, bile rising in his throat. "You don't deserve it." The boy only laughed, a harsh, jarring sound. "It doesn't matter what I deserve. It only matters what's written." And then he was gone. The silence that followed was unbearable. Michael pressed his forehead to the closed notebook, his body trembling. He had given permanence to a monster. The hotel had tricked him again. When he finally lifted his head, the portrait on the wall across the music room caught his eye. A small shape had emerged in the background. Ruthven's smirk, sharp, his eyes burning from the painted shadows. Michael felt the Stanley tighten its grip around him, the hum curling with amusement. It wasn't just keeping the lost. It was keeping the cruel. and it had just used him to remember one more. Michael left the music room in a daze, his body cold, though sweat clung to his skin. The notebook weighed heavier now, not with grief, but with something darker. Ruthven's name burned like a scar across the page. He had given voice, not just to the lost, but to the dangerous, the cruel. As he walked, the hum seemed different, not pleading, not weeping. It purred low and pleased, as though the Stanley itself had tasted blood. The corridors narrowed as he moved through them, wallpaper sagging from water-damaged carpets threadbare. He tried to retrace his steps back toward the grand lobby, back toward light and people, but the hallways shifted. Doors appeared where he didn't remember them. Stairs doubled back on themselves. The Stanley was bending around him, guiding him deeper, and then he saw it, a door unlike the others. Old, swollen with age, its surface carved with names, hundreds of them gouged into the wood in desperate, uneven hands. Some were scratched so deep the grooves bled black into the grain. Others overlapped, written again and again, as though the writer feared forgetting. Michael's stomach turned. He reached out fingers, brushing the carved surface. The hum surged in approval, vibrating under his touch. The doorknob was cold. He opened it. The room beyond was vast and dim, lit only by a single chandelier swaying gently overhead. The air was heavy, thick with dust, but beneath it lay another smell, copper metallic, unmistakable. Books, not scattered, not rotting like those in the basement. These were ordered, neatly lined along shelves that rose impossibly high, vanishing into the gloom above. Each spine was marked with a name, each book identical in size and binding. An archive, a library of the forgotten. Michael stepped inside, breath caught in his throat. His footsteps echoed too loudly. As he moved deeper, whispers rose around him, faint but constant. Voices murmuring through the leather spines, restless, endless. He ran his fingers across one at random, Clara Whitfield. The book thrummed under his touch. Another, Jonah Whitlock. Another, Annabelle. His own notebook pulsed in his arms, the pages vibrating like a tuning fork. The books on the shelves seemed to answer, humming faintly in recognition. Michael froze when he saw the far end of the room. A table stood there, and on it a single open book. It was larger than the others, bound in dark leather, the edges gilded in gold. Its pages were filled with careful flowing script, an elegant hand that was not his. The words shifted as he looked at them. Letters crawling sentences rewriting themselves. And then on the open page he saw it. His name, Michael Anderson. The blood drained from his face. He staggered back, shaking his head violently. No, not me. But the letters carved deeper into the page, glowing faintly, as though branded into the parchment. His chest tightened, every breath a struggle. The whispers rose into a chorus, all the books joining together. Write, write, write. Michael gripped his notebook, shaking. I won't let you have me, he shouted, his voice raw. I won't be your next story. The chandelier swayed violently, dust raining down. The shelves groaned, the books rattling in unison. The open tome at the far end turned its page slowly, deliberately, ink etching itself as he watched. Another line appeared beneath his name. Michael Anderson arrived. Michael Anderson listened. Michael Anderson wrote. Michael's knees buckled. He pressed the locket to his chest, its heat barely pushing back the crushing weight of the Stanley's script. No, he whispered through clenched teeth. Not finished. Not yet. The book paused. The ink bled, waiting. Michael staggered forward, slamming his notebook down onto the open pages of the tome. The impact cracked through the silence like thunder. Then I'll write it myself, he hissed. My story, not yours. The hum shuddered the entire hotel, groaning as though struck at its foundation. The whispers screamed, furious, panicked. The shelves trembled, books spilling to the floor in waves. The tome beneath his notebook writhed, letters twisting violently across the page. But Michael pressed his pencil to paper, his hand shaking but firm. Michael Anderson is not the Stanleys. Michael Anderson chooses. The chandelier above exploded glass raining down. The voices wailed the hum, fracturing into chaos. And in that moment, Michael felt for the first time the Stanley falter. The room shook like the belly of a storm. Books rained down from the shelves, slamming into the floor in clouds of dust, their spines snapping open to spill names and memories like torn flesh. The chandelier swung wildly above chains, groaning its broken crystals, scattering shards of light across the chaos. Michael clutched the notebook against the great tome, his pencil gouging deep into the page. His words carved through the crawling script, searing like fire against ink that fought to overwrite him. Michael Anderson is not the Stanleys. Michael Anderson chooses. The page hissed as though scalded letters, twisting, burning, writhing to erase what he had written. But his scrawl held fast, glowing faintly through the chaos. The voices roared, no longer pleading, no longer desperate, furious. You belong. You belong. You belong. Michael's throat tightened. His arm shook violently, but he pressed the pencil harder, writing over and over, defiant. I choose. I choose. I choose. The locket seared against his chest, its heat burning straight into his skin. He ripped it free, holding it high. The initials glowed white, blinding the lock of hair inside, shimmering as though alive. The voices recoiled, shrieking, the shelves shuddering violently. From the floor, books split open, pages flaring with light. Faces surged from them. Daniel, Clara, Eli, Lydia, Jonah, flickering like firelight. Annabelle's ribbons twisted. Ruthven's smirk lingered. Thomas's sorrow burned steady. They looked at him all at once, their eyes-wide voices layering together. Finish us, they pleaded, or we'll never be free. Michael's pulse raced, his heart a drumbeat of terror. I don't know if I can free you. I don't know if it's even possible. Daniel's face leaned forward, pale and flickering. But you remembered us. That's enough. That's everything. The Stanleys roared deep into the tome beneath his hands, vibrating violently. New words etched themselves across the page, fighting his scrawl. Michael Anderson stays. Michael Anderson writes. Michael Anderson belongs. Michael's eyes blurred with sweat and tears. He pressed the pencil until it nearly snapped. No, I write my way. The room erupted. Shadows lashed out from the walls, slamming against him, tearing at his arms and legs. His body convulsed under the weight of them, dragged toward the open tome as though to be swallowed whole. The locket flared, bursting into a blinding light that seared the shadows, forcing them back. Michael screamed into the chaos, his voice raw, ragged. Then, take this down, you parasite. Write it in your walls. Write it in your bones. I am not yours. The pencil splintered. His last line gouged across the page, jagged but defiant. Michael Anderson will not be forgotten. The tome convulsed, its pages, curling edges, blackening as though caught in flame. The shelves split, toppling. Books spilled like bodies, names pouring out into the room. The chandelier tore free, crashing into the floor in a thunderous burst of fire and glass. And then silence, thick, total. Michael collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, his skin blistered from heat and shadow. The great tome lay before him, closed smoke curling from its seams. His notebook lay atop it, trembling faintly, but the pages inside were still intact. He reached for it with shaking hands. The cover was warm alive, and when he opened it, the names inside no longer glowed with the Stanleys' possession. They glowed faintly with his scrawl alone. Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, Lydia, Jonah, Annabelle, Ruthven, all there, but not written by the hotel, written by him. Michael stared, tears burning his eyes. You're still with me, he whispered. The hum had stopped. The Stanley was silent. For the first time since arriving, the building felt still. But even as relief began to bloom, dread curled cold in his chest, because in the quiet, in the pause, he knew the hotel was not defeated. It was waiting, and he was running out of pages. Michael stumbled from the library, his notebook pressed tight against his chest. The corridor beyond looked unchanged, same wallpaper, same sconces flickering dimly. But the silence was different. The hum was gone. For the first time, the Stanley wasn't breathing in his ear. He moved through the halls like a man wading through water, body heavy, legs trembling. His reflection in the grand windows startled him. Ashen face, blistered palms, clothes torn and dust streaked. He hardly looked alive. At the landing he stopped. The portrait loomed. He braced himself, knowing what he'd see. And there they were. Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, Lydia, Jonah, Annabelle Ruthven. Their faces sharper than ever, brush strokes, alive eyes glinting with something that seemed to follow him. But something was different. They weren't just watching him, they were watching the hotel. Their eyes no longer carried only sorrow or cruelty. They carried defiance. As though his words, his stubborn scrawl carved into the great tome, had given them something the Stanley couldn't take back. Michael touched the frame, his fingers trembling. "I can't stay here," he whispered. "If I do, I'll be next." The silence pressed against him. No roar, no whisper, just waiting. He left the portrait behind, descending the final staircase to the lobby. Guests bustled, staff carried trays, the mundane life of a grand hotel in motion. No one noticed him limping toward the front desk. No one saw the notebook trembling in his arms. "I need to check out," he rasped to the clerk. She glanced up, her smile automatic. But when her eyes landed on the notebook clutched against him, the smile faltered. For a fleeting second, her expression shifted, something sharp, something fearful. Then it smoothed again. "Of course, Mr. Anderson. Will you be returning to us soon?" Michael forced his voice steady. "No, never." The clerk's pen hovered over her ledger. Her eyes lifted to his glassy distant. "We'll see." Michael's skin prickled, but he didn't wait. He turned, moving quickly toward the door. His blistered hand pressed against the glass, and for the first time since his arrival, it opened easily. Cool mountain air rushed over him, sharp and clean. He stumbled onto the porch, the Stanley looming behind him, its windows black and watchful. The silence stretched taut as wire, and then the wind carried it away. He clutched the notebook tighter. The pages inside were nearly gone, only a few blank sheets remained. His story was unfinished. Their stories were unfinished. The Stanley had not let him go. Not really, but as he walked down the mountain road, he whispered into the wind more to himself than to the hotel that still listened. "I choose what I write, not you." The words hung in the air, fragile, but true. And for the first time, the hum did not answer back. Still, the blank pages whispered softly against one another as though waiting for the next hand, the next story, the next name. Michael did not look back. And so, dear listener, the Stanley grows quiet for now, its walls settling back into silence, its windows dark as a sleeping beast. But silence in that place is never peace. It is patience. It waits, as it always has, for footsteps in the hall, for laughter carried on mountain air, for another curious guest who hears a sound they cannot explain. Michael left with his notebook scarred and trembling, but not broken. He carried with him the names of the lost etched in his scrawl. Daniel, Clara, Thomas, Eli, Lydia, Jonah, Annabelle Ruthven. Each of them remembered, each of them freed in some small way, though the hotel still painted their faces into its walls. Whether he saved them or only carried them deeper into the Stanley's keeping is a truth he may never know. The mountain winds will carry his vow far. I choose what I write. And perhaps that is the only shield we ever have against the places that want to own us the power to tell our story in our own words, not theirs. If you ever find yourself in a quiet hallway where the wallpaper peels and the silence feels too thick, listen closely. Do you hear footsteps behind you? Do you hear a cry that doesn't belong to the living? If you do remember, stories have weight. To speak a name is to bind it. To write a name is to give it permanence. And once a place like the Stanley learns you can hear it, may never let you go. But for tonight, close your eyes. Let the walls of your own room steady you. Let the sound of your breath carry you gently toward sleep. The cries will fade for now,